5. Build your imperfect family. I am happiest when I am home with my family, reports Angela, age 40. Married for 14 years and the mother of 3 kids ranging from 4 to 12, she considers her family the most important part of her life. She works part-time, but her career definitely takes a back seat to family life. What about when she is unhappiest? When asked this, she thinks for a moment, and then confesses, with a half smile, I guess that would be when I am home with my family. Angela's experience isn't unique. Family can bring us to the highest highs and lowest lows. On the one hand, there are few things as deeply satisfying as family harmony. Most people in the United States and all over the world in 14 out of 17 developed countries surveyed by the Pew Research Center in 2021 consider their families to be the biggest source of meaning in their lives. On the other hand, there are few things more upsetting than family conflict, which can send even the steadiest of souls into a tailspin. Fears about loved ones' health and mortality are the second and fourth most common fears that Americans hold to. Fears number 1 and 3 are corrupt government officials and nuclear war, in case you are curious. With the stakes around it so high, building this first pillar of a happier life is one of the best and most reliable ways to improve well-being. Most people say they want a happy family, but what does that mean? By family, we generally mean the people you live with and are related to by blood, adoption, or marriage, kids, parents, siblings, and spouses. So far, so good. The harder part is figuring out what it means for a whole family to be arguably happy, or if it is even possible. If you take your cues from television, generally a bad idea, you will think your goal as a family is to be like those on Leave It to Beaver or the Brady Bunch. But those families don't exist in real life. Maybe a happy family depends on the kids. After all, you're only as happy as your unhappiest child, goes the old saying. One of the worst feelings of despair for parents is seeing your child suffering and not being able to help. So perhaps a happy family is one without unhappy kids. Good luck with that. Is it one where the parents have a perfect marriage, never suffer unemployment or struggle with illness? Never seen it. In truth, truly happy families exist only in the minds of the writers of wholesome family television shows. They don't exist in the wild. In real life, families are made up of people mashed together. This can result in the most mystical kind of love, the love you didn't choose but that was given to you. It inevitably also means plenty of conflict. Even in the best of situations, tension between family members is normal, and crises are par for the course. In one pair of researchers' words, family bonds are frayed by the give and take between autonomy and dependence and the tension between concern and disappointment. 3. That's academic essay for family life can be a huge mess. There are 5 common challenges that make family life most complicated, which we will cover in this chapter. Each one bears similarity to the issues we took on in our own heads in the first half of the book, and, not surprisingly, each has a solution using the same basic tools. Here's the important thing to remember: challenges are actually opportunities to learn, to grow in this unique and powerful area of love, as long as we use the tools we developed earlier in this book. Challenge 1. Conflict. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. This is the famous opening line from Leo Tolstoy's novel Anna Karenina. For the story starts in a moment of chaos in the Oblonsky family, where the father has just been discovered having an affair with the parents. Distracted and distraught, the children ran wild all over the house, and every member of the family felt as if there were no sense living together again. Even if the Oblonskys exact conflict never afflicted your family, many other conflicts probably have, and they may have led you to intense unhappiness. Perhaps you saw it as evidence that you are doing everything wrong. In truth, family unhappiness due to conflict is a signal that something important is right where it should be. You are upset because your family matters to you. If it weren't true, you would feel the same way about conflict in your own home as you do about conflict in the family down the block. Mildly concerned and sympathetic, perhaps, but certainly not miserable. Furthermore, you know very well that trying to avoid unhappiness is never the right way to make life better. Think of conflict like the bill for a delicious meal at a restaurant. The only way for it to be zero is not to order the meal. Conflict is the cost of abundant love. The objective is not to make it go away, it is to manage it metacognitively, replace it when possible with positive emotions, and blunt it as necessary. What accounts for family conflict? Generally, it is a misalignment between how family members view their relationships and the roles that they each play. In other words, mismatched expectations. For example, parents tend to see the benefit of family bonds primarily in terms of shared love. Children generally view the benefit in terms of exchanges of assistance. According to research, fathers report higher levels of involvement in the relationship than their kids perceive. Similarly, children tend to think that they are doing more to help than their parents think they are. All of this creates resentment, which is only natural when people you love fail to meet your expectations. It is exacerbated when the other party doesn't even seem to notice. Other areas of unmet expectations are common as well. Children can seem unambitious to parents who struggled to make ends meet early on. The kids might not try hard enough in school. As young adults they might forego marriage or children, to their parents' disappointment or disapproval. Similarly, parents might withdraw financial support in a way that seems selfish to grown kids, or appear more interested in their own lives than in those of their children and grandchildren. Siblings can fail to support each other in any number of ways. The most extreme form of unmet expectations is a values breach, in which one family member rejects something about the other's core beliefs. An example of this is a child who rejects the parent's religion, or who declares the parent's beliefs immoral. We hear stories all the time of young adults who come home from college and announce to their parents that they are completely wrong about everything. Some conflicts result in a rupture to the relationship. Researchers writing in 2015 found that about 11% of mothers ages 65 to 75 with at least 2 grown children were totally estranged from at least one of them. They found that a values breach was at the root of many of these estrangements, while a violation of behavioral norms, for instance, not practicing their faith, usually was not. Take a moment and think about what this says. Your family generally cares less about how you live and more about what you say about what they believe. Acknowledging family conflict is good, because it improves communication and gives you opportunities to solve problems. Conversely, denying family conflict is unhelpful, because family conflicts generally don't die of old age. On the contrary, research shows that without working on conflicts, parent-child and sibling relationships remain strained as everyone involved ages, a phenomenon partly explained by a theory known as the developmental schism hypothesis. 8. So accept the fact that you are like almost every other family, and take the opportunity to make things better. Here are 3 ways to do so. First, don't try to read minds. As the years go by, many families fall into a tendency to assume that communication need not be spoken, that everyone understands one another without saying anything. This is an invitation to miscommunication. Evidence shows that it's best to have a clear family policy of speaking for yourself and listening to others. 9. One way to do this is with regular family meetings, where each of you can air issues that are on your mind before they fester into a major problem or misunderstanding. 10. If this is too awkward, then set regular meetings in groups of 2 for the most sensitive topics. The key isn't asking anyone to change their reactions to your actions or feelings, it's giving them the chance to hear your side of things and respond before you start assuming that you know what their response will be. Second, live your life, but don't ask them to change their values. Estrangement within families is a tragedy, perhaps inevitable in cases of abuse, but avoidable in so many clashes of pride. You have to decide yourself whether a schism is warranted, but as the research suggests, family members, especially parents, are likelier to accept lifestyle choices that they disagree with than accept differing values, which they might perceive as a personal rejection. 11. Perhaps this sounds morally inconsistent or even hypocritical, but it isn't. Many people hold values that they do not share with their loved ones. They can still coexist permanently with these differences of opinion without feeling hurt or angry, precisely because they don't expect anyone else to change their mind. And because they don't insist on agreement, there is no reason to feel aggrieved. Third, don't treat your family like emotional ATMs. When people treat their family as a one-way valve of help and advice, usually, parents giving and children receiving, the resentment tends, ironically, to go both ways. Conversations, visits, and calls become tiresome, repetitive interviews instead of conversations. Our belief is that this stems from a stunted development in the relationship. For example, if you are a young adult, perhaps mom and dad still treat you like a youngster. Meanwhile, you rarely or never ask about their lives or take a true human interest in them. Rather than expecting your family members to be bottomless fonts of help and wisdom or to stop giving you unsolicited advice all the time, take the lead by treating your family the way you do your friends, both generously giving and gratefully accepting emotional support. Research shows that the relationship can be greatly enhanced when adult children and their parents treat each other as individuals with past histories and limitations, in other words, as real people. 12. Challenge 2. Insufficient complementarity. In some family relationships, you sort of expect a fair bit of conflict, say, between adolescents and their parents. But in others, conflict feels like a real threat, because we are told by our culture it is bad. The best example of this is conflict between spouses or romantic partners. Discord in this area almost never feels like a good thing and is seen as evidence that something is wrong. And how do you avoid conflict with your spouse or partner? By being compatible. If there's one piece of conventional wisdom about romantic life, it's that you need a high level of compatibility. The idea is that there is less discomfort and conflict when your partner is a lot like you. If you find someone compatible, the attraction will be higher and the relationship more successful, or so the thinking goes. This is wrong. Just consider the evidence from people who are dating. Dating apps, which almost everybody uses, have made compatibility easier and easier to achieve. Before you ever see someone in person, you can sort her or him on any number of dimensions to raise the odds of a good fit. Less pain, more gain. But here's a weird thing: most daters, people who are not in a committed relationship but would like to be, or people who date casually, are struggling. 13. In a 2020 survey, 67% said their dating life was not going well. 14. 3/4 said that finding someone to date was difficult. The fact is that the more we achieve compatibility, the harder love gets to find and maintain. From 1989 to 2016, the proportion of people in their 20s who were married fell from 27% to 15%. 15. And in case you think that's just a commentary on traditional marriage, the same survey shows that the percentage of 18 to 29-year-olds who had not had any sex in a year nearly tripled from 2008 to 2018, from 8 to 23%. 16. Looking for someone who has a lot in common with you is called homophily, and it is natural. As egotistical creatures, we tend to rate those who are similar to us as more appealing, socially and romantically, than those who aren't. 17. Consider the case of political views. According to the online dating site OkCupid, 85% of millennials responding to a 2021 survey said that how a potential date votes is extremely or very important to them. 18. And among college students, 71% of Democrats and 31% of Republicans said that they would not go out on a date with someone who voted for the opposing presidential candidate. 19. The effects of homophily are even stronger when it comes to education. Researchers have found that educational attainment is the most important dating criterion for millennials, exceeding earning potential, physical attributes, and political and religious affiliations. 20. They also found that 43% of daters with a master's degree judge potential partners based on the college they attended. Some similarity in basic values is no doubt beneficial to a partnership, but too much sameness brings huge costs. Romantic love requires complementarity, that is, differences. A sociologist named Robert Francis Winch advanced this idea in the 1950s by interviewing couples and assessing the personality traits of those who were successful and those who weren't. 21 He found that the happiest couples tended to round out each other's personality, an extrovert and an introvert, for example. Research has found that strangers assigned to perform a task in pairs feel warmer toward each other when their personalities are complementary than when they're similar. 22 In one study, people described their ideal romantic partners as similar to themselves, but their actual partner's personality traits were uncorrelated with their own. 23 We may think we want partners like ourselves, but we wind up pursuing long-term relationships with people who are different from us. The attractive force of difference may have biological roots. Scientists have long known, for example, that children inherit a wider variety of immune defenses when their parents differ greatly in a group of genes called the major histocompatibility complex, MHC. None of us can look at a potential mate and decode her MHC at first sight, but there is evidence that we sense components of it through smell, though we don't realize it, because our olfactory neurons function below the level of consciousness, and that we're more attracted to people whose genes smell different from our own. 24 In 1995, Swiss zoologists asked women to sniff t-shirts worn by men they didn't know but who had worn the shirts for 2 straight days. 25 The women preferred the smelly shirts worn by the men whose MHC genes were most different from their own. Later research on different populations found the same result. 26 Despite all this evidence that you really shouldn't be searching for a version of yourself when you date, the most common ways that Americans find partners these days via websites and apps are smorgasbords of sameness. 27 Algorithms allow people to find dates like themselves with brutal efficiency. 28 It might make for fewer disputes, but in searching for your doppelganger, you might be overlooking the people who complement you, psychologically and even physically. This search for compatibility has spilled over into how long-established couples see themselves. If you have been in a relationship for a long time and are struggling to keep it together, you might have assumed that you simply aren't compatible enough. This is possible, of course. Every couple needs some things in common. More than likely, the real problem is that you and your partner have not been working to turn your differences into the complementarity a healthy relationship needs. To get more complementarity into your love life, here are 3 things to do. First, seek out differences in personality and tastes. For example, if you are dating, look for someone who is not your double on the introvert-extrovert dimension. You will learn a lot from each other, as you will see in the next chapter, if you seek to show each other the joys of going to parties one night and being alone the next. This expands the pool of potential mates and makes life more fun. If you are long married, make a list of the ways your partner is different from you. For example, if you are a worrier and your spouse isn't, it may have driven you crazy that she or he doesn't care enough about all the problems in life. Instead, reclassify your spouse as your personal agent in the art of lightening up. You can be their personal threat spotter. Second, focus more on what really matters. Too many couples get hung up on differences that are frankly ridiculous, like political issues. If you need to, make a list together of the 10 things in your life you both agree are most important. If you have kids, they will probably be number 1. Your extended families, faith, and work will all be near the top. Politics and other bones of contention will be way down at the bottom, if they make the list at all. Now resolve to focus your time together on the important stuff. Third, if you are dating, let humans make your matches instead of machines. One of the most robust trends in meeting potential mates over the past 3 decades has been the move away from dates set up by friends. More than half of people ages 54 to 64 have had a blind date, a date set up by others, where the daters are unacquainted, in their life, according to datingadvice.com, versus only 20% of adults ages 18 to 24-29 on the surface. This makes some sense. Why waste a whole dinner out trying to meet a person on the basis of someone else's recommendation when a closer match is just a few clicks away? If you have read this far, you know the reason. Traditional blind dates are generally arranged by people who know you and have thought about whether your personality fits with your dates. The less exclusively you rely on an internet dating profile, the freer you can be from philosophical prejudices, and the more you might rely on more primitive mechanisms, like your nose. This strategy only works, of course, when your friends know eligible matches with whom to set you up. If you ask your friends to help, and they consistently come up dry, it may be evidence that you need to expand your social circle. Challenge 3. The negativity virus. A healthy family is not conflict averse. Conflict is different, however, from chronic negativity, which can spoil family life. The ambient culture in a family, or in any close-knit group, determines the ability of the members to solve problems. Think of it like the room temperature. If the temperature in your house is 100 degrees and you are feeling too hot, it doesn't really matter how many clothes you take off. You'll still be too hot. Similarly, a negative culture in a family can make problem solving impossible, so there is no growth or learning, just chronic unhappiness. This often occurs because of emotional contagion, which psychologists have studied extensively. 30. There's not a particular problem to solve, just a "this sucks" attitude that moves between family members. Escaping from contagious negative emotions can be difficult, but more to the point, when we truly love others who are suffering, especially our family, we don't want to avoid their sadness, frustration, fear, or anxiety. We want to help, and that's good. Just as we shouldn't push away our own negative feelings if we want to grow and solve our problems, we can help those we love by accepting their emotions. But we don't have to take on their unhappiness in the process. Emotional contagion isn't all negative, of course. You can probably think of people in your life with whom you always seem to be smiling, and others who make you feel warm and generous. Researchers have even studied positive emotional contagion, finding that living within a mile of a friend or family member who becomes happier makes you 25% likelier to become happier. 31. But unhappiness is more contagious and spreads faster. 32. A negative mood in a meeting can infect the whole room in seconds. Emotions jump between people through a number of mechanisms. 33. The most obvious is conversation, in which you transmit and take on the emotions of others through facial expressions, vocal tone, and posture. You probably have found that when you interact with certain people, you laugh more than normal even when things aren't funny. With others, you complain a lot about things that aren't a problem. Negative emotional viruses can also be carried home from school or work due, paradoxically, to trust. If you have, or had, little kids, you know that sometimes they are fine all day at school, but when they see you to pick them up, they burst into tears and tell you nothing but horror after horror. This is because they trust you and save the hard stuff all day for you. It feels like punishment, but it is actually love. Grown ups do this, too, by the way. Smiling all day at work and then complaining all evening at home. You can catch others' emotions physiologically, at least in part. In one experiment, people who inhaled a disgusting smell and those who merely observed a video clip of a person with a disgusted expression had activation in the same parts of the brain. 34. As we saw earlier, similar results have been found in the experience of pain. Your brain can sense it simply by seeing someone else who is hurting. 35. This is especially true for people who live together. 36. The idea of emotional contagion is far from new. More than 1800 years ago, while Emperor of Rome, the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote about emotional contagion during the dreaded Antonine Plague. 37. The virus killed as many as 2,000 people a day. 38. Still, Marcus wrote, the corruption of the mind is a pest far worse than any such miasma and vitiation of the air which we breathe around us. The latter is a pestilence for living creatures and affects their life, the former for human beings and affects their humanity. 39. Many people can relate to this after the lockdowns during the COVID pandemic, when their families were all cooped up together. The worst part was often when family members started spreading a terrible attitude, which everybody caught. Similarly, you might prefer to have a cold go around your family on vacation than a foul mood that spoils all the fun. For a lot of people, the way to avoid negative emotional contagion is to avoid an unhappy person, like you would any communicable disease. But in the cases where love transcends the trouble, when the unhappy person is a spouse, a parent, a child, a sibling, and you choose to stay in the same house, research yields 4 lessons on how you can help while not allowing it to take over the culture. First, as we've shown throughout this book, put on your own oxygen mask first. Work on your own happiness and unhappiness before trying to change your family's. This might seem to contradict the research saying that you should attend more to others. This is different. You need to protect yourself precisely so you can help others. Say you are living with or near an unhappy parent. Start each day by tending to your own happiness hygiene. Exercise, meditate, call a friend. Give yourself an hour or 2 of space from the unhappy person, if you can, and focus on what you enjoy and are grateful for. This will give you the happiness reserves you need to lift up someone else. Second, don't take negativity personally, if you can. Whether there is conflict or not, thinking that someone else's unhappiness is directed specifically toward you is only human. Personalization of negativity and conflict is one of the most powerful ways that unhappiness spreads. Psychologists studying this tendency find that taking negativity personally can lead to rumination, which damages your mental and physical health and ruins your relationships by encouraging you to avoid others and seek revenge. 40. If you care for an unhappy family member, or even just spend time in the same room as them, remind yourself each day, it's not my fault, and I won't take this personally. View unhappiness in the same way you would a physical malady. The afflicted person might lash out and blame you because of sheer frustration, but you wouldn't likely accept this blame unless you're the one who injured them. Third, break the negative culture with surprise. Helping others to be happy is not straightforward. Saying cheer up, for example, what psychologists call reframing, is usually counterproductive. 41. Just imagine someone saying it to you when you are in a dark mood. It is much better to get the unhappy person to engage in an activity that you know she likes. Research has shown that actively engaging in an enjoyable activity improves mood more than doing nothing, suppressing the bad mood, or envisioning good times. 42. There's a catch, though. The researchers have also found that asking unhappy people to imagine happy activities, a step that is necessary for planning them in advance, made them less likely to participate in them. This is because the mood they are being encouraged to imagine seems difficult to attain, making the happy activity seem difficult as well. Even if you ordinarily enjoy riding your bike, it can seem like a chore when you are sad or depressed. Yet if a family member shows up for a spontaneous ride, you might just say yes and be more likely to enjoy it. Finally, prevent the spread. So far, the advice here has been geared toward someone who wants to help an unhappy family member. If you are the unhappy one, remember that your loved ones want to help. Doing so might make them happier. More to the point, people who love you don't want you to suffer. Isolating yourself or pretending to be happy just to make other people more comfortable won't benefit anyone. Instead, actively communicate with others to help keep your relationships healthy. Perhaps this means telling your sibling, I want you to know that although I am going through a hard time right now, it's not your fault. Or maybe it involves strategic avoidance during particular parts of the day if you tend to feel down at those times. The bottom line is that while you may not be able to will your feelings to improve, you can choose how you talk to and treat others, which will give your loved ones more energy to help you when you need it. Challenge 4. Forgiveness. Have you ever heard of the South Indian monkey trap? 43. It consists of a hollowed out coconut with some rice inside, chained to a stake. The coconut has a hole in the top just large enough for a monkey to insert its hand but not big enough to remove a fistful of rice. While villagers watch from a distance, a hungry monkey reaches in and becomes trapped, unable or unwilling to give up its handful in exchange for its freedom. The villagers can then walk right up and take the monkey away. Before you say anything unkind about the dumb monkey, ask yourself whether you are doing more or less the same thing when it comes to Conflict in your family life. Do you wish the ambient culture were warmer, but you are held back by unresolved anger? If so, you are stuck in an emotional monkey trap. You're not alone, we all face this situation from time to time in our families, and not just in the obvious cases where we cling to bad feelings by flatly refusing to forgive. Sometimes we sabotage the freedom we crave. Even when we say we've forgiven others, whether because we still harbor resentment deep down or because we're holding on to offenses to use later against the people who have wronged us. To achieve greater happiness and freedom, we all need to abandon these sorts of partial forgiveness. In 2018, scholars identified 4 successful forgiveness strategies that family members use to heal a relationship after a transgression or conflict has occurred. Discussion: let's talk this through so I can let go of the hurt. Explicit forgiveness: I forgive you. Nonverbal forgiveness, such as showing affection after a fight, and minimization, which involves classifying the transgression as unimportant and simply choosing to disregard it. 44 researchers have found that all 4 of these strategies can be effective, and the one chosen typically depends on the severity of the grievance. 45 For example, discussion is most often used for the worst offenses, such as infidelity in a marriage. Minimization and nonverbal forgiveness are most often used for the least problematic issues, such as showing up late for dinner. Explicit forgiveness is probably best for conflicts somewhere in the middle. The thing about talking through a problem or telling someone, I forgive you, is that it takes a lot of effort and bruises your pride, and might mean giving up something you want. So sometimes people try shortcuts that seem like good ways to resolve a dispute but don't work in the end. Researchers have written about conditional forgiveness, in which vindication is deferred and stipulations are made. I will forgive you when you do X and Y, and pseudo-forgiveness, which happens when partners decide to suppress or ignore an issue without actually forgiving, not to be confused with minimization, which is different. 46 Conditional forgiveness can provide what researchers call emotional protection, that is, a feeling of safety to the damaged partner, but can also keep a wound open. Pseudo-forgiveness can prolong an unhappy family relationship because no actual forgiveness takes place, which, the research shows, bodes ill for a relationship's survival. Conditional and pseudo-forgiveness can look attractive to an aggrieved family member for a number of reasons. Conditional forgiveness offers the victim power over the transgressor, a way to get a desired behavior by holding out the carrot of true forgiveness. Pseudo-forgiveness solves nothing, and can create a grudge that is exploited in moments of irritation. Conditional or pseudo-forgiveness are monkey traps, a handful of emotional rice chosen over freedom from anger and bitterness. In order to avoid the emotional monkey trap, you'll need to deliberately choose not to fall into it. Releasing the rice takes patience and self-control. First, when you're choosing forgiveness, remember that resolving a conflict is not charity, it primarily benefits you. The monkey trap metaphor makes this clear, and so does the wisdom of the ages. The 5th century Buddhist sage Buddhaghosa writes that by indulging anger and refusing to forgive, you are like a man who wants to hit another and picks up a burning ember and so first burns himself. 47 Abundant modern research backs up this idea, showing that forgiveness benefits the forgiver mentally and physically. 48. Second, widen your conflict resolution repertoire, especially when what you have tried before isn't working. Perhaps you are a natural minimizer, quick to forgive family members when you can easily dismiss their wrongs against you. The person with whom you have a conflict might believe the severity of the situation is too great to be resolved this way. If you're the one who's been wronged, escalate to explicit forgiveness. If the problem is mutual, try discussion, and talk it out. And third, don't dismiss minimization too quickly. In many cases, abandoning a conflict rather than trying to solve it is the perfect solution. Ask yourself whether your argument is really important enough to, say, lose contact with your loved one, and act accordingly. Challenge 5. Dishonesty. Do you have something you wouldn't dare share with your family? There are a lot of good and logical reasons not to say what you think, especially when others disagree strongly. Offending people feels terrible, and it can lead to unpleasant consequences. Withholding the truth or nodding along might seem practical, despite the fact that you are screaming dissent on the inside. Just maybe, however, the true act of love is to stop avoiding problems and simply look outward and say what you see, to be courageous, and work toward a family that can take it. In the 1990s, the writer and psychotherapist Brad Blanton argued just that in his book Radical Honesty. When the truth is hard to accept, telling it can have costs, including frayed relationships at home. 49 But Blanton suggested that complete honesty, no white lies, no exceptions, is worth the consequences because it can reduce stress, deepen connections with others, and reduce emotional reactivity. If you are of the "let's not go there" school of family relations, you might be skeptical of this argument. The research favors honesty. Nonetheless, families where people bottle up their feelings and beliefs are not at their best, because they can't bring their full selves to the party. To avoid unhappiness through conflict, they wind up avoiding the happiness that comes from greater intimacy and understanding. Why do we withhold the truth from or even lie to loved ones? As much as we would like to say we are protecting others, it is usually motivated by a focus on ourselves. We want to bolster their opinion of us. School is going fine. To avoid conflict, I agree with your political views, or to protect others, you look great, Dad. 50 And then there's sheer laziness. When Mom asks, "How did you like dinner?" you might not have the energy to explain that it was too salty. Some lies might make life easier, but like most inward-focused behavior, they don't necessarily make life happier. When a lie is discovered, it generally harms trust. Even little white lies can do this in family life. When we tell family members things we think they want to hear, we treat them as if we were strangers avoiding conflict. Imagine learning that your spouse found it easier to simply humor you. It would bother you a lot, most likely. For getting happier, closeness beats momentary harmony. The point of honesty is having enough love for others to be precisely who you are, with complete transparency, even if it is difficult for both of you. Of course, that is easier to say than to do, especially if you have the kind of family with a long history of bottling things up. Fortunately, research from psychologists can help to get you started. First, before being honest, solicit and accept honesty from others. Some people are quite willing to tell the truth to everyone, no matter who gets offended, but become prickly when presented with truths that they find difficult to accept. The tendency to dish out criticism while being unable to take it is one of the classic traits of narcissists, and to put it less academically, it's the style of the thin-skinned jerk. 51 Such behavior is not an expression of love. Committing yourself to honesty starts with a commitment to be honest with yourself, and an effort to seek out and accept complete honesty from others, especially loved ones. Ask people for the truth as they see it, starting with those closest to you, and make a commitment not to be offended when they give it. Note that their opinions are not facts, meaning that you have to use your judgment on letting the truth you hear affect your actions. Furthermore, sometimes what you hear will be intended to offend you. You can almost always choose not to take offense. Second, offer truth to heal, never to harm. What generally holds us back in our ability to persuade one another is that we use our opinions as a weapon instead of as a gift. The same principle applies in even greater force when it comes to the truth. If you keep the truth to yourself when it's convenient and use it to hurt others when you're feeling hurt, as we often do in emotional arguments with family members, then your honesty is not an expression of love. Look for the virtues rather than the imperfections in others. If you do that, most of the truth you speak will be honest appreciation and praise. Third, make the truth appealing. If you do need to offer an occasional, less than positive appraisal, think of a way to reframe it as an opportunity for growth. Rather than telling someone, "You're wrong," say, "Here's a way you can think about this issue differently." Your honest feedback will not always be appreciated, of course, but it can soften the blow. Maybe your family is such that a policy of real honesty sounds insane to you. Start slowly, and tell your family members it is what you want so you all can understand each other better. Little by little, it will get easier. You all will be less self-protective and more generous. It's kind of like exercise, it will take a while, but then it will become a habit, and then it will feel like a necessity. As you build up this muscle, you can expand honesty outward, toward friends and strangers. Always remember, though, to do so while healing and appealing, so that your honesty continues to be an act of love. Never give up. Family life can be such a unique joy that no effort to build a happier life can neglect it. But even the best adjusted families are challenging, especially surrounding conflict, compatibility, negativity, forgiveness, and honesty. To sum up, here are the main lessons to make each challenge into a source of growth. 1. Don't avoid conflict, which is your family's opportunity to learn and grow if you understand where it originates and manage it appropriately. 2. You naturally think compatibility is key to relationship success, and difference brings conflict. In truth, you need enough compatibility to function, but not all that much. What you really need is complementarity to complete you as a person. 3. The culture of a family can get sick from the virus of negativity. This is a basic emotional management issue, but applied to a group instead of to you as an individual. 4. The secret weapon in all families is forgiveness. Almost all unresolved conflict comes down to unresolved resentment, so a practice of forgiving each other explicitly and implicitly is extremely important. 5. Explicit forgiveness and almost all difficult communication require a policy of honesty. When families withhold the truth, they cannot be close. One last point, if your relationship with your family is especially difficult, working to improve it might sometimes feel like a lost cause. It's easy to throw up your hands. Almost every day, we hear from people all over the world who feel stuck in family problems that seem like they have no solution. Maybe you have said, I just want to turn my back on those people and get on with my life. Giving up is almost always a mistake, because those people are, in a mystical way, you. Your spouse is a completion of you as a person. Your kids provide a rare glimpse into your own past. Your parents are a vision of your future. Your siblings are a representation of how others see you. Giving that up means losing insight into yourself, which is a lost opportunity to gain self-knowledge and make progress as a person. Never give up on the relationships that you did not choose, if at all possible. But what about the relationships that you have chosen? 6. Friendship that is deeply real. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were, begins Edgar Allan Poe in his haunting 1829 poem Alone. 1. It details his inability to connect emotionally with other people, to share joys and sorrows. All I loved alone. Poe was not an especially solitary figure. He grew up in a fairly ordinary family, attended school, and served in the military. Yet through it all, he never made any deep human connections, beyond perhaps his cousin Virginia, whom he married when she was 13, he was 27. But who died of tuberculosis a few years later. According to his obituary, Poe had few or no friends. To most people, were simply not worth his time. It's not that no one wanted his company. It's that he didn't much want theirs. Again, his obituary, he had made up his mind upon the numberless complexities of the social world, and the whole system with him was an imposed tour. His loneliness was self-imposed. Still, Poe suffered terribly from his lack of friends, self-medicating with alcohol and gambling to numb his pain. Before he died at age 40 under circumstances probably involving alcohol poisoning, he confessed his problem. It has not been in the pursuit of pleasure that I have periled life and reputation and reason, he said. Rather, it was a sense of insupportable loneliness. 3. Friendship is the second pillar of building a happier life. Friends can lighten the load of the heaviest days. There are few joys in life as wonderful as seeing a close friend after a long separation. Without friends, no one can thrive. This is the clear conclusion from decades of research, for friendship accounts for almost 60% of the difference in happiness between Individuals, no matter how introverted or extroverted they are, five a life with close friends can be happy even when many other things are going wrong. A life without close friends is like a house in the winter, in Massachusetts, without heat. Unfortunately, the latter case is increasingly common in our society. Social scientists ask survey questions like, when was the last time you had a private conversation in which you shared personal feelings or problems? Over the past 3 decades, the percentage of Americans who would answer never to this question has nearly doubled. 6. The percentage of Americans who say they have fewer than 3 close friends has doubled since 1997. The reasons for this sound an awful lot like Poe syndrome, but on a mass scale. We are willfully neglecting friendships, and even pushing them away. Our fixation on screens and social media makes it easier to be alone than ever, and many young people even confess that making friends in person now feels awkward or frightening. Our poisonous culture war has broken up perfectly good friendships as well. Polling data have shown that about 1 in 6 Americans have stopped talking to a friend or family member since 2016 because of politics. 8. And then, of course, there's COVID. If your life didn't go back to its 2019 era normal, you are not alone. In a poll conducted in March 2022, 59% of respondents said they still had not fully returned to their pre-pandemic activities. 9. More serious for happiness is that many people now prioritize socializing for fun less than they used to in the before times. In a poll long after the pandemic lockdowns had ended, 21% of respondents said that socializing had become more important to them since the coronavirus outbreak, but 35% said it had become less important. 10. Many feel anxious about socializing, with the number one reason being not knowing what to say or how to interact. 11. Many of us have simply forgotten how to be friends. The good news is that it's never too late to relearn friendship skills and restart old relationships. With the right information, nearly all challenges can be met. In this chapter we cover the 5 challenges that people most commonly face and how your management skills can turn them into precious opportunities. Challenge 1. Your personality. By all accounts, Edgar Allan Poe was an introvert. Perhaps you are, too. And you consider that to be an inhibiting factor in the ability to make more friends and get closer to people. It doesn't have to be this way. In fact, what might have seemed like a high personality barrier to your developing more friendships might be your source of strength, if you use it right. An easy measure of friendship health is the number of friends you have. You will read here or there that you need 3 friends, or 5, or some other specific number to be happy. This is arbitrary, and it doesn't take account of your specific personality. Here is the rule of thumb: you need at least 1 close friend besides your spouse, and there is an upper limit of perhaps 10 friendships that you can realistically spend enough time on to regard them as close. The exact number depends on you, and especially whether you are an introvert or an extrovert. Neither is better or worse than the other if managed properly, but each personality can experience its own difficulties. Psychologists see extroversion/introversion as one of the big 5 personality dimensions, along with agreeableness, openness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism. 12. The Big 5 theory has been a staple of psychology since the 1980s, but the introvert-extrovert binary was first popularized in 1921 by the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, who posited that the 2 groups have different primary life goals. 13. The former, he thought, seek to establish autonomy and independence, the latter seek union with others. Those stereotypes have persisted to this day. The German-born psychologist Hans Eysenck further developed Jung's theory in the 1960s, arguing that our genetics determine our relative extroversion. 14. He believed that cortical arousal, that is, the brain's level of alertness, was more difficult to achieve for extroverts than introverts, so the former seek stimulation in the company of others, ideally the fresh company of new people. 15. Subsequent research has shown mixed results on Eysenck's specific theory, but has found clear cognitive differences between the groups. 16. In general, extroverts are happier than introverts. In 2001, a group of Oxford scholars broke a sample of survey respondents into 4 groups. Happy extroverts, unhappy extroverts, happy introverts, and unhappy introverts. 17. The happy extroverts outnumbered the happy introverts by about 2 to 1. One common explanation for the happiness differential between introverts and extroverts follows from stereotypes like Jung's and Eysenck's. Humans are inherently social animals, so contact brings happiness. Extroverts seek out contact, so they are happier. Extroverts also have a natural edge in enthusiasm, a passionate state of mind, according to one famous psychoanalyst in the 1960s, which is one of the elements of personality most closely associated with happiness. 18. Enthusiasm about life's events leads to higher enjoyment and a better mood. It also lowers the tendency to withdraw socially. The fact that introverts prefer solitude and often struggle with sociability doesn't mean that they don't need friends. It just means that new friendships can be harder for them to establish. On the other hand, extroverts face a different challenge: going deep. They tend to flit among lots of people whom they know just a little, and can find an emptiness in their lives when a crisis happens and they don't have anyone to turn to who knows and loves them deeply. Whether you are an introvert or an extrovert, your personality doesn't have to stand in the way of real friendships, as long as you manage yourself. A good way to do so is by taking a lesson from your opposite. For example, one source of happiness for almost everyone is hope about the future, a sense of life purpose, and self-esteem. Extroverts love to talk to others about the future, their dreams, their life's purpose. As psychologists have long shown, we tend to act according to the commitments we have articulated to others, so the extrovert habit of telling everyone you meet about your goals makes you more likely to reach them and therefore get happier. 19. Introverts find sharing personal hopes and dreams with strangers uncomfortable. What they should do is talk about their castles in the sky with their close, one-on-one friendships. Meanwhile, extroverts should learn from introverts how to establish and maintain a few deep friendships. This isn't so easy for extroverts, because of their love of crowds, audiences, fresh contact, and excitement. Research shows that extroverts tend to have a lot of low-depth friendships with other extroverts. 20. Extroverts should set a goal each year to deepen one friendship. The way to do this is by organizing your social life specifically around one-on-one conversations about profound things, instead of insisting on congregating in groups. Avoid trivial subjects like hobbies and politics, and move toward deep issues like faith, love, and happiness. This will deepen some of your friendships, and in other cases show you in a hurry that you should look elsewhere for depth. Challenge 2. Excessive usefulness. Are your friends useful to you? I hope so, you might say. But that's a mistake for happiness. Make a list of the first 10 of your friends who pop into your head. Some you would text with any silly thought, others you call only a couple of times a year. Some are people you look up to, others you like, but do not especially admire. You fit into these categories for others as well. Maybe you are helpful to one person and a confidant to another. You get different things out of different relationships, which is all well and good. There is one type of friend almost everyone has, the friend from whom you need or want something. You don't necessarily use this person. The benefit might be mutual, but the friendship's core benefit is more than camaraderie. He or she is useful. These are what some social scientists call expedient friendships, with people we might call deal friends, and they are probably the most common type. Most of us have 21. The average adult has roughly 16 people they would classify as friends, according to one 2019 poll of 2,000 Americans. 22 of these, about 3 are friends for life, and 5 are people they really like. The other 8 are not people they would hang out with one-on-one. We can logically infer that these friendships are not an end in themselves but are instrumental to some other goal, such as furthering your career or easing a social dynamic. Expedient friendships might be a pleasant and certainly useful part of life, but they don't usually bring lasting joy and comfort. If you find that your social life is leaving you feeling a little empty and unfulfilled, it might just be that you have too many deal friends and not enough real friends. A lot of research has indicated that one of the best predictors of well-being in middle age is being able to name a few truly close friends. 23 is. We just discussed, it doesn't have be 10, and in fact, people tend to down-select their friends to a smaller group as they get older. 24 it has to be more than none, however, and the list should extend beyond your spouse or partner. All the more reason, then, to take honest stock of your friendships. A convenient way to do this comes from none other than the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, in his Nicomachean Ethics. 25 he argued that friendships can be classified along a kind of ladder. At the bottom rung, where people are least connected emotionally, so the commitment is weakest, are the deal friends based on utility to each other in work or social life. These are colleagues, partners to a transaction, or simply those who can do each other favors. Higher up are friendships based on pleasure. Something you like and admire about the other person, such as their intelligence or sense of humor. At the highest level are friendships of virtue, or what Aristotle called perfect friendship. These friendships are an end in themselves, and not instrumental to anything else. Aristotle would say they are complete, pursued for their own sake and fully realized in the present. These levels are not mutually exclusive. You can carpool to work with a friend who has the unfailing honesty you strive to emulate. The point is to classify friendships by their principal function. You might not be able to put it into words, but you probably know how these perfect friendships feel. They often feature a shared love for something outside either of you, whether that thing be transcendental, like religion, or just fun, like baseball, but they don't depend on work, or money, or ambition. These are the intimate friendships that bring us deep satisfaction. In contrast to these real friendships, deal friendships, those at the lowest level on Aristotle's ladder, are less satisfying. They feel incomplete because they don't involve the whole self. If the relationship is necessary to the performance of a job, it might require us to maintain a professional demeanor. We can't afford to risk these connections through confrontation, difficult conversations, or intimacy. Unfortunately, societal incentives push many of us toward deal friends and away from real friends. The average American worker spends 40 hours on the job during the work week. In leadership, the numbers are much higher. 26 Most of us work with other people, so during the work week we have less time for our family than for our colleagues, let alone for friends outside of work. In this way, deal friends can easily crowd out real friends, leaving us without the joys of the latter. So what are you going to do? Start by going back to your list of 10 friends. Next to each name, write real or deal. Some of these will be judgment calls, no doubt. That's fine, just do your best. Then, next to the real friends, ask yourself how many people know you really well who would notice when you are slightly off and say, "Are you feeling okay today?" How many of these people are you comfortable discussing personal details with? If you struggle to name even 2 or 3, that's a dead giveaway. Even if you can, be honest, when was the last time you actually had that kind of conversation? If it has been more than a month, you might be kidding yourself about how close you really are. How many people are left on your list? If there are none besides your spouse or partner, we have identified a problem to solve. The key to real friendship is a relationship that isn't a stepping stone to something else, but rather is a blessing to pursue for its own sake. One way to do this is to make friends not just outside your workplace, but outside all of your professional and educational networks. Strike up a friendship with someone who truly can do nothing for you besides care about you and give you good company. The quality to look for is uselessness, not worthlessness. We all have had those friends, too. That requires showing up in places that are unrelated to your worldly ambitions. Whether it is a house of worship, a bowling league, or a charitable cause unrelated to your work, these are the places where you meet people who might be capable of sharing your loves, but without advancing your career. When you meet someone you like, don't overthink it, invite them over. In our go-go world, where professional success is valorized above all else and workism has become like a religious cult to many, it can be easy To surround ourselves with deal friends 27. In so doing, we can lose sight of the most basic of human needs, to know others deeply and to be deeply known by them. People of many faiths place this deep knowing at the heart of their relationship with the divine, and it is central to achieving change in psychotherapy. 28. One of the great paradoxes of love is that our most transcendental need is for people whom, in a worldly sense, we do not need at all. If you are lucky and work toward deepening your relationships, you'll soon find that you have a real friend or two to whom you can say, "I don't need you, I simply love you." Perfect friendships, as beautiful as they are, can be very hard to maintain. Deal friends generally show up again and again in your life over the course of earning a living. You don't have to make a special effort to maintain them. Real friends are another matter. It is all too easy when your life is busy with family and work to let them fall by the wayside. Someone who was a perfect friend during college might inadvertently become someone you talk to only once or twice a year after you graduate, not because it's what you intend, but because time just passes. By the time you are in middle age, it is quite common to have very few if any of these perfect friends simply due to life pressures and the passage of time. As with anything else of value, it is important not to leave these relationships to take care of themselves, because they generally won't. With your list of real friends and people you would like to be on that list, make a concrete plan for staying in touch and seeing one another. Some people will set up a regular time each week to phone or video chat. Others have a policy of taking each other's calls even while at work or at home, if possible. And it is very wise to find a way to see each other in person for a day or a week every year. In a busy life, you can't realistically maintain too many of these friendships, perhaps just a couple. Aside from your spouse, you need at least one. To that person, the highest compliment you can pay her or him is, "You are useless to me." Challenge 3. Attachment to opinions. Of the many ideas from Eastern religion and philosophy that have permeated Western thinking, the second noble truth of Buddhism arguably shines the greatest light on our happiness, or lack thereof. Samudaya, as this truth is also known, teaches that attachment is the root of human suffering. To find peace in life, we must be willing to detach ourselves and thus become free of sticky cravings. This requires that we honestly examine our attachments. What are yours? Money, power, pleasure, prestige, the distractions we sought to be free of with greater emotional self-management? Dig deeper, just maybe. They are your opinions. The Buddha himself named this attachment in its terrible effects more than 2400 years ago, when he is believed to have said, "Those who grasp at perceptions and views go about butting their heads in the world." 29 More recently, the Vietnamese Buddhist sage Thich Nhat Hanh wrote in his book Being Peace, "Humankind suffers very much from attachment to views." 30. This attachment can be absolutely disastrous for friendships. There is nothing wrong with holding beliefs strongly, of course. The problem is when a disagreement about those beliefs gets in the way of friendship, the idea that you can't be close to someone because they hold views different from your own. For example, maybe you have very strong political views, and you convince yourself, or let yourself become convinced by others, that your friends who don't hold them are immoral or defective. Or maybe your friends are religiously opposed to something about the way you live, and you conclude that this means they are denying your humanity. We're not talking about abuse here, just differences of beliefs. This is Po syndrome. To a T, you kill a friendship because another person doesn't deserve your company. It is completely self-defeating, because it leads to your own loneliness and isolation. The solution is, calling back to an earlier chapter, to substitute a chosen virtue for the emotion that is causing harm, one that cultivates love and focuses you on others. This is a virtue in shorter and shorter supply these days, humility. Specifically, a kind that social scientists call epistemic humility, or the recognition that someone else's viewpoint might be useful or interesting, or at least doesn't mean you can't love the person. Obviously, this is hard. If it weren't, 1 in 6 Americans wouldn't have cut off contact with friends and family over politics. But the happiness reward is enormous. In one 2016 study, researchers created a humility score 31. They found that it was negatively associated with depression and anxiety, and positively associated with happiness and life satisfaction. Furthermore, they found that humility buffers the negative impact of stressful life events. The reason is not something neuroscientifically complicated. Humble people just have more real friends, because they are more fun to be with. As is almost always the case with social science, the data on humility and happiness reinforce what philosophers have long taught. Around the turn of the 5th century, St. Augustine gave a student 3 pieces of life advice. The first part is humility, the second, humility, the third, humility. And this I would continue to repeat as often as you might ask direction. 32. The humility to admit when we are wrong and to change our beliefs can lead us to make more friends and get happier. But with our defenses arrayed against this virtue, we need a battle plan to alter our way of thinking and acting. Here are 3 strategies you might want to add to your arsenal. First, admit quickly when you think you are wrong. People despise entertaining the idea that they aren't right, because they fear that doing so will make them look stupid or incompetent. Thus, left to your limbic tendencies, you will fight to the death for even your worst ideas. This tendency is itself based on an error. In a 2015 study, researchers compared scientists' reactions to being informed that their findings don't replicate, that is, they are probably not correct, a common problem in academia. 33. It would be no surprise if scientists, like most people, got defensive when contradicted in this way, or even doubled down on their original results. But the researchers found that this sort of behavior was more harmful to the scientist's reputation than simply admitting they were wrong. The message for the rest of us is this: if you might not be right, just be open to others' views. Second, welcome contradiction. One of the best ways to combat a destructive tendency is to adopt an opposite signal strategy. For example, when you are sad, often the last thing you want to do is see others, but this is precisely what you should do. When your ideas are threatened and you feel defensive, actively reject your instinct to defend yourself and become more open instead. When someone says, "You are wrong," respond with, "Tell me more." Make friends who think differently than you and challenge your assumptions and whose assumptions you challenge. Think of this as building your team of rivals, the phrase the historian Doris Kearns Goodwin used to describe Abraham Lincoln's cabinet, which, unlike Kennedy's, challenged him relentlessly. 34. If this sounds like torture, it is all the more urgent that you try it. Third, start small. Let's suppose that you want the benefits of entertaining a friend's point of view. Getting started is hard, especially if the viewpoint is something huge, like your religious beliefs or your political ideology. It's better to start with smaller ideas such as your fashion choices, or even your sports allegiances. Reconsider the things you have long taken for granted, and assess them as dispassionately as you can. Then, with these low stakes, open up to others' views. The point is not to deal in trivialities. Research on goal setting clearly shows that starting small teaches you how to change and break habits. 35. Then you can scale this self-knowledge up to the bigger areas of your life in which, even if you don't change your views, you can appreciate others. If you master these techniques, there might be critics who say you are a flip-flopper, or wishy-washy. To deal with this, take a lesson from the great economist Paul Samuelson, the first American ever to win the Nobel Prize in economics. In 1948, Samuelson published what might be the most celebrated economics textbook of all time. 36. As the years went by and he updated the book, he changed his estimate of the inflation level that was tolerable for the health of the macroeconomy. First, he said 5% was acceptable, then, in later editions, 3% and 2%, prompting the Associated Press to run an article titled "Author Should Make Up His Mind." In a television interview after Samuelson was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1970, he gave his answer to the charge: "When events change, I change my mind." What do you do We bet Samuelson had a lot of close friends. Challenge 4. Magical thinking. We often fail to include our romantic partner on our list of friends. They feel kind of like a different species, don't they? Maybe you have had the experience in your life of falling in love with someone but finding down the road that you didn't actually like that person very much. You probably had to unwind a complicated relationship at that point, and maybe it was pretty messy. And you probably puzzled over how could you feel such intense passion for someone you found you didn't even really like as a person. Passionate love. The early feeling of falling in love is one of the most powerful and mysterious experiences any of us will face in life. If you feel like your emotions have been hijacked, especially at the beginning, it's because they have been. Your brain looks strikingly like that of someone addicted to drugs, with unusually high activity in brain regions for both pleasure and pain, such as the ventral tegmental area, nucleus accumbens, caudate, insula, dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex 37. Meanwhile, your brain has become a chemistry experiment. Physical attraction to another person is indicated by spikes in the sex hormones testosterone and estrogen. Your anticipation of being with your partner and euphoria come from high dopamine and norepinephrine levels. 38. Your uncomfortable infatuation involves a deficit of serotonin. 39. Your attachment and jealousy involve boosts in oxytocin. 40. Passionate love is eucentric. The neurochemical cocktail in your brain is making you think about your feelings all day long, and about your partner as he or she relates to you. So it's no surprise that while exciting, it doesn't bring a lot of happiness. Passionate love also doesn't last, which people often find disappointing and alarming. When passion recedes, people mistakenly interpret this as love itself receding. Nothing could be further from the truth. The early flush of romantic love must turn into something that is stable and lasting, which is one of the greatest secrets to getting happier. The Harvard Study of Adult Development, which is the longest-running study on individuals over the course of their whole lives, shows that the most important predictor of late-life happiness is stable relationships, especially a long romantic partnership. 41. The healthiest and happiest people at age 80 tend to have been most satisfied in their relationships at age 50. The key to successful romance isn't trying to keep passion front and center, it's letting it evolve. This does not mean just sticking together. Legally, research shows that being married accounts for only 2% of subjective well-being later in life. 42. The important thing for well-being is relationship satisfaction, and that depends on what social scientists call companionate love, stable affection, mutual understanding, and commitment. 43. Companionate love is a special category of friendship. You might think companionate love sounds a little, well, dull. This is because our popular culture and media tend to portray love and romance unrealistically, leaning disproportionately on magical thinking like love at first sight and living happily ever after. 44. Research on Disney's animated movies, for example, shows that the majority of them rely on exactly these themes. 45. These films may, in turn, influence children's and young adults' views on romance. A 2002 study on 285 unmarried undergraduate students, both women and men, found a strong correlation between the time they spent watching television programs related to love and romance and how much they expressed idealistic expectations about marriage. 46. A 2016 study found that tween girls who had recently watched a movie depicting a love story were more likely to endorse idealistic romantic beliefs than those who had watched a non-romantic movie. 47. Despite its popularity in stories and movies, love at first sight has little to do with reality. Researchers have found that what people describe as love at first sight has no connection to the real hallmarks of true love, including intimacy and commitment. 48. Rather, it is either a phrase people use about the past to romanticize their meeting, notwithstanding the way it actually happened, or one that they use to describe exceptionally strong physical attraction. Idealistic but unrealistic beliefs can do a lot of damage to your relationship. Take the idea of romantic destiny, or soulmates, the belief that two people are deliberately brought together by unseen forces. Research on hundreds of college students has shown that such expectations are correlated with dysfunctional patterns in relationships, such as the assumption that partners will understand and predict each other's wishes and desires with little effort or communication because they're a cosmically perfect match. 49. In other words, a belief in destiny leads to a belief in mind reading. Companionate love is the right goal to be the closest of friends, who are also still in love. Passionate love in the early stages is exciting precisely because the other person is a bit of a stranger. Thus, deep friendship is impossible. The goal is to keep attraction alive while getting to know each other intimately. This intimate friendship means sharing full personhood with each other. To go from me to we. There can obviously be disagreements, anger, and bitterness, even unhappiness. The objective is not to avoid this, but to learn and grow through problems. It is to see them as shared challenges to manage jointly. The goal is not to avoid fights, it is to grow closer with a collaborative conflict style, where you work together to find solutions. Based on the research, there are 5 ways to develop the deep friendship of companionate love that lasts. First, lighten up. Passionate love tends to be heavy. It is usually serious and unfunny. Good companionate love, which leads to rising happiness, is much lighter, because best friends bring out the lighter side in each other. They gently joke with each other and have fun together. Goof around together, like you do with any close friend. Second, make the companionate love more about the two of you, and less about each individual. You shouldn't be afraid of arguing, but you have to do it right. Researchers studying couples' arguments have found that those who use we words when they fight are apt to have less cardiovascular arousal, fewer negative emotions, and higher marital satisfaction than those who use me/you words. 50. You might have to work on this, especially if you have built up bad habits over many years. Instead of saying, "You don't try to understand my feelings," try, "I think we should try to understand each other's feelings." Make we your default pronoun when talking with others. If you like staying out late but your partner hates it, say, "We prefer not to stay out so late," when you turn down a 10 p.m. dinner for your partner's sake. Third, put your money on your team. Many couples act individualistically when it comes to their money, keeping separate bank accounts, for example. They usually think they are avoiding conflict, and perhaps they are, but they are also avoiding an opportunity to think and act as a team of friends. Indeed, scholars have demonstrated that couples who pool all their money tend to be happier and more likely to stay together. 51. This might be harder for partners with different spending habits, but research has shown that people tend to spend more prudently when they pool their resources. 52. Fourth, treat your arguments like exercise. Something every inveterate gym goer will tell you is that if you want to make fitness a long-term habit, you can't view working out as punishment. It will be painful, sure, but you shouldn't be unhappy about doing it regularly, because it makes you stronger. For collaborative couples, conflict can be seen in the same way. It's not fun in the moment, but it is an opportunity to solve inevitable problems collaboratively, which strengthens the relationship. 53. One way to do this is to schedule time to work through an issue, rather than treating it like an emotional emergency. Look at a disagreement as something we need to find time to fix, instead of as me being attacked by you, which is a disturbing emergency. 54. Finally, make your companionate love exclusive. Romantic love makes most people happiest when it's one-to-one, emotionally and sexually. This isn't popular with some people today, but this life advice is based on evidence, not morality. In 2004, a large survey of American adults found that the happiness-maximizing number of sexual partners in the previous year is calculated to be 1. 55. One last point, while companionate romantic love is best when it is exclusive, friendship per se should not be. In 2007, researchers found that married adults who said they had at least 2 close friends, meaning at least one besides their spouse, had higher levels of life satisfaction and self-esteem and lower levels of depression than spouses who did not have close friends outside their marriage. 56. In other words, long-term Companionate love might be necessary, but it isn't sufficient for happiness. Challenge 5. The virtual world. In 1995, Rena Rudavsky and her family were selected to participate in a novel psychology experiment. Researchers at Carnegie Mellon University would install a computer in their dining room and connect it to the internet. At the time, only 9% of Americans used the internet. In 2020, nearly 91% did. 57 Rena, then a middle schooler, recalled sitting in front of the computer day after day, participating in chat rooms and surfing the internet. When she finished, another family member would take a turn. Strangely, this experiment didn't spark much discussion in her household. We did little conversing in the dining room when the computer was on, Rena told us. Furthermore, none of us shared our private internet experiences with others in our family. Rena's experience was typical, as the researchers showed when they published the now famous HomeNet study in 1998. 58 greater use of the internet was associated with declines in participants' communication with family members in the household and declines in the size of their social circle, the researchers wrote. More ominously, it led to increases in the participants' depression and loneliness. Rena says her experience bore out these findings. HomeNet could be, and has been, interpreted as an indictment of the internet, or screens, or modern communications technology in general. In truth, it illustrates a much simpler truth about love and happiness. Technology that crowds out our real-life interaction with others will lower our well-being and thus must be managed with great care in our lives. In order to reap their full benefits, we should use digital tools in ways that enhance our in-person relationships with family and friends. The coronavirus pandemic prompted a lot of new research on social connection. Anytime the circumstances of social life suddenly change, researchers rush in with our clipboards in hand, asking annoying questions. One of the most common areas of inquiry over the past few years was how the sudden mass shift to digital communication away from face-to-face affected overall social connectedness. In one study, researchers surveyed nearly 3,000 adults during the pandemic's early months and found that email, social media, online gaming, and texting were inadequate substitutes for in-person interactions. 59 voice and video calls were somewhat better, although later research also questioned the value of those technologies. 60. The way solitary diversions such as scrolling or surfing reduce social connection is clear: you do them instead of interacting. Virtual communications such as texting are by design interactive and should theoretically be less harmful. The problem is that with these technologies, we lose dimensionality. Text messages can't convey emotion well, because we can't hear or see our interlocutors. The same goes for DMS on social media. More often, social media is used not to communicate with one individual but to broadcast to a larger audience. These technologies are to in-person interactions what a black and white, pixelated version of the Mona Lisa is to the real thing, identifiable, but incapable of producing the same emotional effects. With low-dimensionality communications, we tend to hop from person to person and thus swap depth for breadth. That's why face-to-face conversations tend to be more expansive than those conducted over text. Research has shown that deeper conversations bring more well-being than short communications. 61 Meanwhile, in a recent longitudinal study, teens who texted more often than their peers tended to experience more depression, more anxiety, more aggression, and poorer relationships with their parents. 62. It might seem strange that, even outside the circumstances imposed by the pandemic, we would voluntarily adopt technologies that hurt our happiness. There are two major explanations: convenience and presumed courtesy. Vegetating in front of a screen, which 9 in 10 American teenagers say they do to pass time, is simply easier than talking with a friend, and virtual communications such as texting are faster and easier than a visit or a phone call. 63 Think of these technologies as grab-and-go food. At a convenience store, it's not great, but it sure is easy, and after you eat enough microwave burritos, you forget what the real thing tastes like. Rena's formative childhood experiment made her think deeply about the Internet's effects and has had a lifelong impact on her use of technology. She had a Facebook account in college but deleted it after graduating, and she's never gone back. She avoids other social media networks, and her children have no internet presence. Her work today, which includes, by the way, serving as a research assistant for this book, has a virtual element, but she prefers to go to the office when possible. By today's standards, her life might sound old-fashioned. Her daughter knocks on neighbors' doors to visit. The family sits on their stoop after dinner, chatting among themselves and with passers-by. She writes and sends letters. When she does use technology, it's as a compliment to her friendships, not a substitute for them. She maintains a parent text group, for example, but only to set up in-person activities. For most of us, especially people who grew up with it, the internet is an unquestioned part of the ecosystem of life, seeping into every crack and crevice independent of any conscious decision on our part. We're not going back to life before this kind of technology, of course. We can and should, however, use it mindfully in service of love and friendship. Here are 2 ways to do so. First, choose interaction over vegetation. There is nothing revolutionary about this rule. 45 years ago, kids were told by their parents to go outside with their friends instead of watching television. The difference now, besides the fact that the television didn't fit in my pocket, is empirical evidence. Today, we know that, in excess, solitary and screen-based diversion lowers happiness and can lead to mood disorders such as depression and anxiety. 64. To knock you out of suboptimal habits, make use of device options that inform you of the time you are spending on social media and the internet, and limit yourself to an hour a day or less. Another popular approach, which has not yet been tested in academic research, is turning your devices from color to grayscale. 65. Second, create a communication hierarchy. It's unreasonable to expect anyone to stop texting, but you can turn to it less if you have an order of operations in place for talking with your friends and loved ones. When possible, make an effort to meet in person, especially with your intimates. A 2021 study revealed that the more face-to-face communication people had with others, the more understood they felt and the more satisfied they were with their relationship. 66. When meeting up is impossible, use face-to-face technology or the phone. Text or use similar technology for only impersonal or urgent matters. The blissful work of friendship. Friendship is incorrectly seen by many people as something that just occurs naturally, without conscious effort or work. This is false. Like everything else important, friendship requires attention and work. It must be built on purpose. The big challenges we have covered in this chapter can become opportunities by remembering 5 lessons. 1. Don't let an introverted personality or a fear of rejection block your ability to make friends, and don't let extroversion prevent you from going deep. 2. Friendship is ruined when we look for people who are useful to us for reasons other than friendship itself. Build links that are based on love and enjoyment of another's company, not what she or he can do for you professionally or socially. 3. Too many deep friendships today are spoiled by differences of opinion. Love for others can be enhanced, not harmed, by differences. If we elect to show humility instead of pride, and the happiness benefits are enormous. 4. The goal for long-term romance is a special kind of friendship, not undying passion. Companionate love is based on trust and mutual affection, and is what old people who still love each other talk about. 5. Real friendship requires real contact. Technology can complement your deepest relationships, but it is a terrible substitute. Look for more ways to be together in person with the people you love the most. The first 2 pillars on which to build a happier life, family and friendship, require a lot of time and commitment. For many people, however, a lot more time is spent doing something else, working. If you work 40 hours a week and commute on top of that, this might be the single most time-consuming activity in your life. With this kind of investment, even if it is less important to you than your family and friend relationships, happiness will be hard to increase if work is a source of misery. But, not being a source of misery, is hardly the kind of goal we should shoot for. We can and should do much better. Work should bring happiness. Benefits beyond just giving us the resources we need to survive and support. 7. Work that is love made visible. The third pillar for building a happier life is meaningful work. Hundreds of studies have shown that job satisfaction and life satisfaction are positively related, and causal. Liking your job causes you to be happier all around. Engaging in work with your whole heart is one of the best ways to enjoy your days, get satisfaction from your accomplishments, and see meaning in your efforts. Work, at its best, is love made visible, in the elegant words of the Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran. That's the good news. It's also the bad news. When your work is drudgery, it is bereft of love, and can make life a task. There's no joy in dragging yourself out of bed in the morning to go to a job you hate, where you feel helpless, bored, or unappreciated. Some jobs really are objectively miserable, and striving simply to squeeze by financially is stressful under the best of circumstances. But for most people, when they learn that getting happier starts within, they can make work less stressful, more joyful, and a source of personal growth. It would be convenient if we could tell you exactly what the right job is to do that, and how to get it. But work that raises your happiness does not mean finding a specific job with a lot of prestige or income, although we all have to make enough money to get by. You can love or hate being a lawyer, an electrician, a homemaker, or a full-time volunteer. Researchers who have looked for clear relationships between job satisfaction and the actual type of job one holds have overwhelmingly struck out. In a 2018 survey, the happiest jobs had nothing in common: teaching assistant, quality assurance analyst, net developer, and marketing specialist. 3. The unhappiest jobs are similarly grab-baggy, and fairly unrelated to education and income: accountant, security guard, cashier, and supervisor. Consider the following 2 cases that illustrate that happiness depends on you, not your specific job. Stephanie's dream since college was to lead the top company in her industry as CEO. She worked and strove, and in her mid-40s, she made it to the corner office. And when she made it, she succeeded spectacularly in the job. She took her company to new heights financially and was popular internally. She got positive press for her leadership, and she made good money. "I got the brass ring," she said, "and I'm proud of that. But there were sacrifices. I missed a lot of my kids' childhood," she admitted. "And it hurt my marriage a lot to be gone so much of the time." She also conceded that while she knew a huge number of people and had hundreds of friends, none of them were real friends, mostly just clients and colleagues. After more than a decade of bone-crushing work and top performance, Stephanie was exhausted. Her board and employees would have gladly seen her stay many more years. After all, things were going great for the company, but being honest with herself, she had to conclude that her life simply wasn't passing the cost-benefit test for happiness. There were nice times, but they were smothered in stress, and she felt profoundly alone. Even the legacy Stephanie thought she was building was an illusion. She went back to visit her company a few months after resigning, walking into an opulent headquarters erected during her tenure, and it was as if she had been erased. There was no bad blood, just forward motion. The new CEO was traveling the same routes she had, meeting the same clients, doing the same deals. Her old colleagues were cordial and friendly, but almost no one was especially interested in what she was up to now. Why would they be? She asked rhetorically. Today, she is retired from executive work at 59, congratulated by all for her success, but still looking for something to help make her feel fully alive. Now consider Alex. His dreams were more modest than Stephanie's. He was raised in a middle-class family with middle-class expectations. He would get decent grades, go to a state university, and start a career that offered security, a plausible and rational formula to live a good life. For some reason, that formula never fit Alex, though. He was a solid B student in high school but was never sparked by any of his classes. He went right to college, where he studied accounting, but for him, that was sheer drudgery. After college, Alex landed a job in the accounting office of a manufacturing company in his hometown. He worked there for a year and then moved to another job that paid slightly more. Over the next 2 decades he traded up every few years, and by his mid-40s was making a decent, but not spectacular, living. The bright spot in his life was his family and friends. He was happily married, had 3 kids, and had close friends from high school whom he saw most weekends. He also loved cars and enjoyed keeping his in immaculate condition. Alex says that during this period, he figured that everyone disliked work and did it only out of sheer necessity. Every day at the office was a grueling marathon for him. The paperwork bored him, and he couldn't stand looking out his office window at the parking lot. He was grateful for a steady job that allowed him to help support his family, but he spent every day watching the clock move in slow motion toward 5 p.m., when he could go home. One day, at age 45, Alex was complaining after dinner to his wife for the millionth time about his job. Half listening, she asked him, "Is there anything that you do every day that you actually enjoy?" He thought about it, and could come up with only 2 amusingly mundane activities. "I like driving to work, and I like talking to people on my breaks." "So why don't you quit and become an Uber driver?" she joked. Boom. What was meant as a joke was like Alex's road to Damascus moment. He did it, and has been driving for a living for the past 5 years. "I actually work more hours and make slightly less money than I did," he said. "But I look forward to work. I meet new and interesting people and get to drive all day." He said he comes home in a good mood and never worries about work problems. All that makes him a better husband and father. "I am twice as happy as I used to be," he reported. These are both true stories, not made-up examples. Only the names and a few details have been changed to protect the anonymity of the subjects. Don't misunderstand, there is nothing in these 2 stories to suggest that either Stephanie or Alex got a bad deal in life or made irrational choices. Nor is it the case that making it to CEO or driving for a living inherently brings more happiness or unhappiness than the other. Maybe running a company would be a blast for you, and driving others around would be awful, or vice versa. The fanciest job can be a disappointment or a triumph, and an ordinary job with moderate pay can be delightful or terrible. The decision to stay home to raise your kids, if you can afford it, can be wonderful or not. Retirement can raise your happiness or lower it. To build a career that makes you happier means understanding yourself. It means being the boss of your own life, even if you aren't technically the boss at work. Doing so means managing 4 big challenges which Alex overcame, leading to much greater happiness, but Stephanie didn't. Challenge 1. Career goals. You might be a person who absolutely loves her or his work, has a completely healthy work-life balance, and can't think of anything that could make this part of life better. Wait, you're not? In truth, most people are more or less okay with their jobs, but don't see them as an enormous source of satisfaction. They don't know how to make things a lot better, though, and thus leave this part of life good enough. In 2022, for example, just 16% of employees were very satisfied with their work, 37% were somewhat satisfied. Everyone else said they were somewhat dissatisfied, or very dissatisfied, or said, "I am just glad to have a job." How would you answer? The way to make this better, like Alex did, is to start by clarifying your goals. If your answer to the preceding question was "I am just glad to have a job," you might be motivated by trying to avoid unemployment, the threat of which is one of the biggest sources of unhappiness people can face. American adults who reported that they were very or fairly likely to lose their job in 2018 were more than 3 times as likely to say they were not too happy with their life as people who felt they were not likely to be let go. 5 In 2014, economists found that a 1 percentage point increase in unemployment lowers national well-being by more than 5 times as much as a 1-point increase in the inflation rate. 6. If you aren't in real danger of unemployment, you can set your sights higher. As social scientists would note, while pay and benefits are necessary, they aren't sufficient. Pay and benefits are like eating and sleeping are for your health. You absolutely need them, and if you mess around with them too much, bad things will happen, but if you make these things your only focus, you will wind up unhealthy and unhappy. Your pay and benefits are what are called extrinsic rewards. These come from the outside. If you are someone who has a high power, high prestige job, that would also fall into this category. Meanwhile, your job also has intrinsic rewards, which come from inside you, the inherent fulfillment and enjoyment you get when you do your work. You need extrinsic rewards to get by, but you need intrinsic rewards to get happier. In a classic 1973 study on extrinsic and intrinsic rewards, researchers at Stanford and the University of Michigan allowed a group of kids to choose their preferred play activities, for example, drawing with markers, which they happily did for fun. Intrinsic rewards. 7 The kids were later rewarded for that activity with a certificate featuring a gold seal and a ribbon. Extrinsic rewards. The researchers found that after they had been given the certificate, the children became only about half as likely to want to draw as when they weren't offered one. Over the following decades, many studies have shown the same pattern for a wide variety of activities, across many demographic groups. 8. We humans have a funny tendency to value what we are doing in terms of what people are giving us to do it. If someone pays us, it must be onerous. Otherwise they wouldn't need to. That's why the satisfaction in the experiments falls when the scientists introduce compensation. This is obviously not to say that we should all work for free, rather, it is simply to point out that for happiness, our goals shouldn't be just to maximize extrinsic rewards. We should also consciously keep intrinsic goals front and center. So how do we set goals to achieve intrinsic rewards at work while we make a living? One answer might be to try and find a job that follows the advice of commencement speakers, who always seem to say, find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. This sounds like the right intrinsic reward is to have a job that is a total blast every day. We've never seen that job in real life. Furthermore, you might be a little suspicious of that advice, given that it always seems to come from unbelievably successful people, who, if you look into their backgrounds, absolutely killed themselves early in their careers, often paying an enormous personal price in their relationships to get to the top. They certainly didn't take their own advice. Obviously, you shouldn't sign up for something you hate, but the right intrinsic reward isn't super fun every day. Looking for that will put you on another El Dorado quest for something that doesn't exist, and lead to frustration. Rather than relentlessly pursuing a perfect match career, a better approach is to remain flexible on the exact job, while searching for two big things. The first is earned success. You can think of it as the opposite of learned helplessness, a term coined by the psychologist Martin Seligman to denote the resignation that people experience when they repeatedly endure unpleasant situations beyond their control. 9 Earned success instead gives you a sense of accomplishment and professional efficacy, the idea that you are effective in your job, which pushes up commitment to your occupation, which is also a good measure of job satisfaction. 10. The best way to enjoy earned success is to find ways to get better at your job, whether that leads to promotions and higher pay or not. Obviously, having work where extrinsic rewards follow is great. Employers who give clear guidance and feedback, reward merit, and encourage their employees to develop new skills are the best employers. Even if you aren't in a job with that kind of extrinsic reward, set excellence goals for yourself, such as, I will make each of my customers feel special today. And this leads to the second, related intrinsic goal, which is service to others, the sense that your job is making the world a better place. That doesn't mean you need to volunteer or work for a charity to be happy. Research has shown that non-profit work is not more inherently satisfying than working for a for-profit or for the government. 11 On the contrary, you can find service in almost any job. One young man made this point perfectly, in an op-ed he wrote to explain why, despite holding an MBA, he had chosen to become a waiter in a restaurant in Barcelona. 12 As he put it, his customers are all important and equal. They are the same at the table and must be the same in the eyes of the waiter. It's great to be able to serve the politician on the front page of the newspaper just as well as the kid browsing the news while waiting for his girlfriend. This young man needed extrinsic rewards to make a living, but he didn't choose to maximize them to the exclusion of his intrinsic rewards. Earned success and service to others are easier in some jobs than in others. If, for example, you are in a profession you think is hurting others, service will be hard to achieve. That's why a good rule of thumb is to look for a fundamental match between an employer's values and your own. When people believe in the mission of their employer, they have a lot of intrinsic motivation for their work. 13. This is especially true when the values have special moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance, and it holds even when a job is exhausting and hard. For example, a 2012 study on nurses found that the happiest ones believed their work was a divine profession and a tool by which they could gain spiritual pleasure and satisfaction. 14. We know perfectly well that these goals aren't always easy, and even in the best cases, they can be very elusive on certain days. Even if you find the employer you believe in, that rewards your merit, and where you are serving people all day, you will come home from work some days unfulfilled and frustrated. Think of it like being in a sailboat. You know the wind will blow you off course pretty regularly, but if you have the right coordinates, you will always be able to reorient yourself. Challenge 2. Career path. Relying on extrinsic rewards lowers satisfaction. It can even lock you into the wrong career trajectory for decades to come. This is because it makes you pursue a career path that is wrong for you. Whether you make a lot of money or just a little, the world tells you that there is really just one responsible type of career path. You select a career. You find a job, and you change jobs only when something better in your field comes along. Let's say you come out of high school and take a job as a receptionist at a law firm. You don't just walk away when it's boring or stressful, you stay with it until someone hires you away with a better job. It's the same system whether you are a college professor or a talk show host. You stay with one job until something fancier that pays better comes along. This is what psychologists call the linear career model. 15. It makes a lot of sense for some people, but it is a huge problem for others. Maybe you have a lot of different interests that you would like to pursue, and you think going back to school for a new career would be interesting and fun. Or you highly value a lifestyle where you're good at what you do, but you do not want to work long hours, even if that means not advancing in your career. A linear path doesn't allow for these preferences. Maybe you are a highly educated woman with a great job, but you want to stay home when your kids are born. The linear career says, sorry, you can't do that. Fortunately, there are 3 other career models. Steady-state careers are those that are associated with one job over decades, where one doesn't advance much but increases in expertise. This is common for people who value job security a lot but don't want to bust their hump every day to get ahead. This was much more common in the past than it is today. However, it might be right for you if you really love stability and want a job that, while it doesn't make you rich, is financially secure and allows you to spend your life on things you care a lot about outside work. Another model is the transitory career, which jumps around all over the place. From the outside it looks chaotic. You were waiting tables in Denver, and now you are working for a moving company in Tucson. In a few years you might be driving a long-haul truck out of Seattle. This isn't chaos, however, it is the profile of someone who loves trying new things and who moves around based on non-job criteria, such as lifestyle, location, or social life. Spiral careers are the last category. This is like a series of smaller careers. People in this model might make a pretty dramatic career shift every decade or so, but there is a method to the madness. They are using their skills and knowledge in one field and applying it to another, while getting a variety of experiences for their own fulfillment. So, for example, you might work out of college for a decade doing something connected to what you studied. Then, you might decrease your pay by using your skills in another field. Or you might start your own business. Or maybe you take 10 years away from the workforce to raise your children, and return to something completely different. So, you might be asking, which is the right path for you? In your heart, you probably know already. One of the models we just described made you feel excited and maybe a little scared. Another deadened you inside. And in general, this is the way to know how to proceed along the professional path of your life. Always follow the signals that you yourself are producing internally, and that may be uncomfortable. When you are thinking about a professional opportunity, take some quiet time over a few days or weeks to imagine the job or career in detail. Then, discern how it makes you feel. Does this opportunity excite you, frighten you, or deaden you? Say, for example, you are offered a job in the management of your company. You enjoy your current job and like your colleagues, and worry that a big promotion will make you enjoy your work less and hurt your work-life balance. But it is a great opportunity, and significantly more money. Almost everyone is encouraging you to take it. If it excites you a lot and frightens you a little, this is a signal to move forward. If it simply frightens you, you need a lot more information. If it deadens you when you imagine doing the new job, the answer is clear: turn it down. Challenge 3. Addiction. If you have figured out the right objectives and found your professional path, congratulations, but you aren't yet in the clear in building this part of your life. In fact, there are a number of hazards you need to be aware of that specifically afflict hard-working people of high ambition. The first is the tendency toward workaholism, which people engage in to distract themselves from pain in their lives. This leaves the root problems unaddressed, and even makes them worse by harming family relationships. Consider the case of Winston Churchill, the statesman, soldier, and writer. He was one of the first world leaders to sound the alarm about the Nazi menace in the 1930s, and then he captivated the global imagination as a leader against the Axis powers in World War II. While Prime Minister of the United Kingdom during the war, he kept a crushing schedule, often spending 18 hours a day at work. On top of this, he wrote book after book while in office. By the end of his life, he had finished 43, filling 72 volumes. 16. You probably admire Churchill, and for good reason, but you shouldn't envy him. He suffered from crippling depression, which he called his black dog, and which visited him again and again. He once told his doctor, "I don't like to stand by the side of a ship and look down into the water. A second's action would end everything." 17. It seems almost unbelievable that Churchill could be so productive while in such a dark place. Some say his depression was bipolar, and windows of mania allowed him to work as much as he did. A few of his biographers explain it differently. Churchill's workaholism wasn't in spite of his suffering, but in part because of it. 18. He distracted himself from his problems with work. Lest you think this far-fetched, researchers today find that workaholism is a common addiction in response to emotional distress. And like so many addictions, it worsens the situation it's meant to alleviate. In 2018, researchers analyzed a decade's worth of data and found that 24% of people with an anxiety disorder and nearly 22% of people with a mood disorder, such as major depression or bipolar disorder, self-medicate using alcohol or drugs. 19. Self-medicators were far more likely to develop substance dependence. For example, epidemiological data revealed that people who self-medicated for anxiety using alcohol were more than 6 times as likely to develop persistent alcohol dependence as those who didn't self-medicate. 20. There is compelling evidence that some people treat their emotional problems with work as well. This can lead to its own kind of addiction. Many studies have shown a strong association between workaholism and the symptoms of psychiatric disorders, such as anxiety and depression, and it has been common to assume that compulsive work leads to these maladies. 21. But some psychologists have recently argued reverse causation. That people may treat their depression and anxiety with workaholic behavior. 22. As the authors of one widely reported 2016 study wrote, workaholism, in some instances, develops as an attempt to reduce Uncomfortable feelings of anxiety and depression. 23. This might explain why so many people increased their work hours during the COVID pandemic. 24. For many months during the initial shutdowns, people faced boredom, loneliness, and anxiety. By late May 2020, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control data showed that nearly a quarter of American adults had reported symptoms of depression. 25. In 2019, that figure was 6.5%. Perhaps a portion of workers self-treated by doubling down on their jobs in order to feel busy and productive. People who struggle with workaholism can easily deny that it's a problem, and thus miss the underlying issues they are self-treating. How can work be bad? As the Stanford psychiatrist Anna Lembke, the author of Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence, put it, even previously healthy and adaptive behaviors that I think we broadly as a culture would think of as healthy, advantageous behaviors, now have become drugified such that they are made more potent, more accessible, more novel, more ubiquitous. 26. If you are sneaking into the bathroom at home to check your work email on your iPhone, she's talking about you. What's more, when it comes to work, people reward you for addictive behavior. No one says, wow, an entire bottle of gin in one night? You are an outstanding drinker. But work 16 hours a day and you'll probably get a promotion. Despite the extolled virtues of maximum work, the costs will almost certainly outrun the benefits, as they usually do in self-medicating addictions. The burnout, depression, job stress, and work-life conflict will get worse, not better. 27. And as Lembke also noted, workaholism can lead to secondary addictions, such as to drugs, alcohol, or pornography, which people use to self-medicate for the problems caused by the primary addiction, often with catastrophic personal consequences. There are solutions to work addiction, according to Harvard professor Ashley Wylans. 28. She recommends 3 practices, starting with a time audit. For a few days, keep a careful log of your major activities: work, leisure, running errands, as well as how long you spent on each one and how you felt. Note the activities that bring you the most positive mood and meaning. This will give you 2 pieces of information: how much you are working, to make denial impossible, and what you like to do when you aren't working, to make recovery more attractive. Next, Professor Wylans recommends scheduling your downtime. Workaholics tend to marginalize non-work activities as nice to have, and thus crowd them out with work. This is how the 14th hour of work, which is rarely productive, displaces an hour you might have spent with your children. Block off time in your day for non-work activities, just as you do for meetings. Finally, program your leisure. Don't leave those downtime slots too loose. Unstructured time is an invitation to turn back to work, or to passive activities that aren't great for well-being, such as scrolling social media or watching television. You probably have a to-do list that is organized in priority order. Do the same with your leisure, planning active pastimes you value. If you enjoy calling your friend, don't leave it for when you happen to have time. Schedule it and stick to the plan. Treat your walks, prayer time, and gym sessions as if they were meetings with the president. Dealing with a work addiction can make a real difference in our lives. It opens up time for family and friends. It allows non-work pastimes that are not useful, just fun. It enables us to take better care of ourselves, for example, by exercising. All of these things have been shown to raise happiness or lower unhappiness. Addressing workaholism still leaves the underlying issue that working so hard was meant to treat. Perhaps you, too, are visited by Churchill's black dog. Or maybe your dog is a different color, a troubled marriage, a chronic sense of inadequacy, maybe even ADHD or obsessive-compulsive disorder, which have been linked to overwork. 29. Ceasing to use work to distract yourself from that is an opportunity to face your troubles, perhaps with help, and thus solve the problem that got you hooked on excessive work in the first place. Facing the dog might seem scarier than simply turning to the old dog catchers, your boss, your colleagues, your career. Unlike Churchill, you might just find a way to get rid of that mud for good. Challenge 4. Identity. If you are on a linear, steady state, transitory, or spiral career path, the odds are that you care a lot about your work. When people ask you what you do, you enthusiastically tell them about your profession. In many ways, your job is a huge part of your identity. This tends to be particularly true for people interested in self-improvement. There's nothing wrong with identifying strongly with your profession and being proud of your work. Professional excellence is a great virtue, and we have sought mightily to be excellent in what we do for a living, too. But there's a danger lurking here. It is all too easy to lose your true self to a representation of yourself that is your job title or duties. You aren't Mary, mother of 3, or John, devoted husband. First and foremost, you are Mary, regional manager, or John, senior teacher. This is what is called self-objectification. Objectification of other people is obviously problematic. Research shows that when people are reduced by others to, for example, physical attributes through objectifying stares or harassment, it can lower self-confidence and ability in tasks. 30. The philosopher Immanuel Kant referred to this as becoming an object of appetite for another, at which point all motives of moral relationship cease to function. 31. Physical objectification is just one type. Objectification at work is another, and an especially dangerous one. In 2021, researchers measured workplace objectification. They found that it led to burnout, unhappiness with one's job, and depression. 32. This can happen if a boss treats her employees like nothing more than disposable labor, or even if employees see their boss as nothing more than a provider of money. So it's pretty easy to see why we shouldn't objectify others. Less obvious but equally damaging is when the objectifier and the person being objectified are one and the same. When you objectify yourself, humans are capable of objectifying themselves in many ways by assessing their self-worth in terms of their physical appearance, economic position, or political views, for example, but all of them boil down to one damaging core act: reducing your own humanity to a single characteristic, thus encouraging others to do so as well. In the case of work, that might mean deciding on your own self-worth based on your pay or prestige. Just as social media encourages us to self-objectify physically, our work culture pushes us to self-objectify professionally. Americans tend to admire people who are busy and ambitious, so letting work take over virtually every moment of your life is easy. We know many people who talk of almost nothing besides their work, who are saying, essentially, I am my job. This may feel more humanizing and empowering than saying, I am my boss's tool, but that reasoning has a fatal flaw. In theory, you can ditch your boss and get a new job. You can't ditch you. Remember, you are your own CEO. Self-objectification at work is a tyranny. We become a terrible boss to ourselves, with little mercy or love. Days off provoke guilt and a sense of laziness, which is a way we condemn and belittle ourselves. To the question, am I successful enough yet? The answer is always, no, work harder. And then, when the end inevitably comes, when professional decline sets in, or we have a setback to our careers, we are left bereft and desiccated. Are you a self-objectifier in your job or career? If you answered affirmatively, recognize that you will never be satisfied as long as you objectify yourself. Your career or job should be an extension of you, not vice versa. 2 practices can help as you reassess your priorities. First, put some space between your job and your life. Maybe you have been in an unhealthy relationship or 2 in your life but only recognized this when you had a break from it, whether voluntary or involuntary. Indeed, this human tendency probably contributes to the fact that most trial separations lead to divorce, especially when they last more than a year. 33. Space provides perspective. Use this principle in your professional life. To begin with, the main goal of your vacation should be to get a break from work and spend time with people you love. As obvious as this may sound, that means taking your vacation and not working during it at all. Your employer should thank you for doing so, because people are better workers when they are refreshed. Related to this is the ancient idea of Sabbath keeping, or taking regular time away from work each week. In religious traditions, rest isn't just nice to have, it is central to understanding God and ourselves. For in 6 days, the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested. On the seventh day, the book of Exodus instructs. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. If God rests from work, maybe you should, too. Such a practice doesn't have to be religious, and it can be done in a lot of ways besides simply avoiding all work on Saturday or Sunday. 34.4. Example, you can take a small Sabbath each evening by avoiding work and dedicating all your activity to relationships and leisure. That means no checking your work email. Make some friends who don't see you as a professional object. Many professional self-objectifiers seek out others who admire them solely for their work accomplishments. This is quite natural, but it can easily become a barrier to the formation of real friendships, which we all need. By self-objectifying in your friendships, you can make it easier for your friends to objectify you. This is why having friends outside your professional circles is so important. Striking up friendships with people who don't have any connection to your professional life encourages you to develop non-work interests and virtues, and thus be a fuller person. The way to do this goes hand in hand with recommendation number 1, don't just spend time away from work, spend it with people who have no connection to your work. If your job is taking care of your family, this principle still applies. You need to have relationships with people who see you as more than a provider and caretaker. Maybe challenging your self-objectification makes you feel uneasy. The reason is simple, we all want to stand out in some way, and working harder than others and being better at our jobs seems a straightforward way to do so. This is a normal human drive, but it can nonetheless lead to destructive ends. 35. Many successful people confess that they would rather be special than happy. 36. The great irony is that by trying to be special, we end up reducing ourselves to a single quality and turning ourselves into cogs in a machine of our own making. In the famous Greek myth, Narcissus fell in love not with himself, but with the image of himself. And so it is when we professionally self-objectify, we learn to love the image of our successful selves, not ourselves as we truly are in life. Don't make this mistake. You are not your job, and we are not ours. Take your eyes off the distorted reflection, and have the courage to experience your full life and true self. Love made visible. When it comes to building the life you want, you need to get the work part of your life right. Think about it, probably a third of your life will be spent working, whether that is formal employment, taking care of your family, or some other arrangement. As you examine your vocation and contemplate changes, keep in mind the 4 challenges in this chapter, and the lessons that help you turn them into great opportunities to grow in happiness. 1. Seek intrinsic rewards from your work. The right goals to get the greatest satisfaction from work are not money and power, but rather earned success and service to others. Seek these and you will build a work life that consistently brings joy to you and others. 2. There is not just one path to career success and happiness. Figure out if you are linear, steady state, transitory, or spiral. Then pursue that path by paying attention to your internal signals. 3. Work addiction is no joke for many millions of Americans and others all around the world. Look honestly at your own patterns and assess the health of your habits. For you are not your job. Self-objectification will lead to unhappiness. Make sure you get space from your work, and have people in your life who see you as a person, not as just a professional. Once again, we simply cannot tell anyone what specific job will bring the greatest happiness. It depends on you. What all happy jobs have in common is that for you, the work is something better than just a means to a physical end. That is why we titled this chapter Work That Is Love Made Visible. This can be a tall order. There are days when your work doesn't feel like love made visible, invisible, or anything else. The trick isn't arriving at some far-off state of perfection, it is working toward getting better. To get happier, you strive toward the goal of making your work meaningful. For people of a spiritual or religious inclination, the trick can be to join your physical labor to the metaphysical. This was the fundamental philosophy of the Spanish Catholic saint José María Escrivá. As he argued, through our work we passionately love the world. God waits for us every day, in the laboratory, in the operating theater, in the army barracks, in the university chair, in the factory, in the workshop, in the fields, in the home, and in all the immense panorama of work. Understand this well: there is something holy, something divine hidden in the most ordinary situations, and it is up to each one of you to discover it. 37. Perhaps you read these words and marvel that anyone could find sacredness in the mundanity of a job like yours or any part of ordinary life. It can be done, and you can do it, whether you are traditionally religious or not. But that requires an understanding of 8. Find your amazing grace. Amazing Grace is the most popular Christian hymn ever written, and has been recorded more than 7,000 times. You certainly know the tune, and probably even the words of the first verse by heart. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. What you may not know is the story behind this famous hymn, written around 1772 by a British man by the name of John Newton. Newton was 47 when he wrote it, after having led a life, as he later characterized it, of dissipation and sin, bereft of religious conviction and moral principles too. He made his living transporting enslaved people, after having himself fled forced enlistment in the British Royal Navy. One night when Newton was aboard a ship returning to London, a storm broke out that swept many of his mates out to sea and nearly did the same to him. Later, pondering the reason for his survival, he concluded it was the hand of God, that there was a plan for his life, and his job was to discover it. His habits and beliefs changed as he turned his focus to divine love. He married, and he ultimately became a clergyman and an ardent abolitionist against slavery. Today he is considered one of the people most responsible for the legal end of that institution in Britain. Newton's faith was, he believed, what made him truly free for the first time in his life. He certainly isn't the first person to assert this. However, his famous hymn makes two striking claims. First, he didn't find his faith, he was found. And his happiness didn't come from blocking out the truths of life. On the contrary, his happiness came only when he was able to finally see the truth. Here's the bold claim made in that famous hymn: a search for transcendent truth in Newton's case, in the Christian religion, more broadly, in something beyond the here and now illuminates life. It allows you to actually see reality. And this leads to a new kind of joy unavailable from any other source. How absurd, some might respond. To see reality, we should focus on the unseen and unproven? Reason requires faith? This is like saying that fire requires water, or light requires darkness. In fact, the science is crystal clear. Transcendental beliefs and experiences aid dramatically in our efforts to get happier. Why? Left to our devices, we always focus on the details of our individual lives. This is only natural. Our attention is occupied by our job, our home, our money, our social media accounts, our lunch, and on and on. Most of this is not unimportant, but if we focus only on ourselves and our narrow interests, it gets, well, tedious. We lose a perspective on life. Following a metaphysical path allows us to get a more accurate perspective on life by zooming out on our quotidian worries and everyday cares. It makes us happier by taking the focus off ourselves and putting it instead on the majesties of the universe. It also makes us kinder and more generous toward others, less obsessed with getting and keeping things for ourselves, and more in tune with the needs of a world in which we are but one part. Most important, the path of transcendence is an adventure, a spiritual expedition that can add a kind of excitement to our lives beyond anything else we have ever experienced. But the world and our emotions holds us back. People are shamed by the claim that the interior life is unscientific, that the lack of proof of things unseen is evidence that transcendental beliefs are nothing more than a form of superstition. They wither under a culture that denigrates faith and spirituality at every turn. And they find their own doubts overwhelming. They just don't feel it often enough, and conclude that it is silly. In truth, as you will see in this chapter, spiritual experiences have a deep scientific basis to them, and transcendental experiences provide us with important information about life we cannot get in any other way. Getting these experiences, however, takes effort and commitment. The challenges we all generally face in doing so and the solutions make up this chapter. Writing about faith is tricky. For the two of us, spirituality and faith are central to our lives. We have no intention in this chapter of trying to convert you to any specific beliefs, including our own, but we should begin by disclosing what we believe so you can read this chapter with this information in mind. Arthur, my faith is the most important part of my life. I was raised as a Protestant, but converted to Catholicism as a teenager, after having a mystical experience at the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. My parents weren't thrilled, but figured that as adolescent rebellion goes, that was probably better than drugs. My practice has steadily grown over my adulthood, especially as I have specialized in studying happiness. Today, I attend Mass daily and pray the Rosary in ancient Catholic meditative prayer each evening with my wife, Esther. Despite my deep Christian beliefs and practices, I am a serious student of other traditions in both the West and the East, and am close with leaders of many faiths. I have worked with Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, and Jewish scholars who have brought me closer to God, taught me many truths, improved my faith practices, and enriched my soul. I have also taken a great deal into my beliefs from secular philosophies such as Stoicism. Oprah, I have been guided by a divine hand my whole life. I call that hand God. I practice and honor the Christian faith but remain open to the mystery of all connections, to the oneness we all share coming from the source of all existence. In the words of the theologian and philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, I believe we're spiritual beings having this human experience, and we're all somehow linked to each other in nature, in what I think of as life. On my Super Soul television show and podcasts, I've interviewed hundreds of spiritual teachers and thought leaders from every religion and no religion, and they all emphasize that the spiritual path is the ultimate journey. What I've observed over thousands of conversations is that life is always speaking to us, trying to urge us toward the best version of ourselves. For me, having a spiritual practice has provided an accelerated route to building the life I want. We both have tremendous love and appreciation for people of all faiths and no faith who are sincerely trying to lift others up and make the world better for all people. Again, our objective in this chapter is not to convince you of the rightness of our specific beliefs and practices. Rather, it is to show you how pursuing insight into the transcendent and metaphysical aspects of your life can enrich your existence immeasurably, and help others as well. Your spiritual brain. Why do religious and spiritual people practice? Ask them and they will rarely say, so I can be happier. Rather, they will most likely tell you, like John Newton, that it allows them to make sense of their lives in a confusing world. They have found that insight is not available through their ordinary routines, or through worldly distractions such as entertainment and consumption. Many seek a source of experiences that are bigger than what daily life can provide, such as a sense of awe, a feeling of oneness with others or the divine, and a loss of the boundaries of space and time. This is not all fun and games. People report intense discomfort when adopting a transcendental practice because it shines a bright light on themselves. Beginning meditators have often never been alone with their thoughts. Converts to many religions must confront their sins. Studying the philosophers and applying their insights to life involves fear and sacrifice. To follow almost any spiritual practice is to say, I am going to admit I don't know everything and do this hard thing that the world says is weird and silly. The result tends to be life-changing, starting with our physiology. The psychologist Lisa Miller, author of the book The Awakened Brain, has done extensive work with her colleagues on the neurological mechanisms of transcendent experiences. She has found, for example, that compared with remembering a stressful experience, remembering a spiritual experience reduces activity in the medial thalamus and caudate the brain regions. associated with sensory and emotional processing, thus, perhaps, helping people escape the virtual prison of overthinking and rumination. 3. By studying behavior in patients with brain lesions, other scholars have linked self-reported spirituality to activity in the periaqueductal gray, the brainstem region associated with, among other things, the moderation of fear and pain, and feelings of love. 4. Memories of especially strong spiritual encounters such as, for example, union with God have been observed using electroencephalogram technology. In one experiment on Carmelite Catholic nuns, neuroscientists in 2008 compared the sisters' brain activity when they were instructed to recall the most mystical experience of their lives versus when they were asked to remember their most intense state of union with another person. 5. The mystical condition, compared with the control condition, induced a significant increase in theta waves in the brain, a pattern also associated with dreaming. 6. In follow-up interviews, the nuns spoke of feeling God's presence during the original experiences, as well as unconditional and infinite love. Religious belief is strongly correlated with searching for and finding purpose in life. Psychologists writing in 2017 measured 442 people's stated level of religious commitment, and found it strongly correlated with their sense of meaning. 7. Perhaps not surprisingly, given the strong association between having a sense of meaning and happiness, religion and spirituality have been shown to protect against depression recurrence and anxious reactions to mistakes. 8. Researchers have shown the same pattern for physical ailments. Patients undergoing treatment of serious illness reported better quality of life if spiritual care professionals, such as chaplains, were involved in their care, along with doctors and nurses, compared with those whose spiritual needs were left out of their care plans. 9. Religion and spirituality pursued in community with others can also lower people's sense of isolation. This might be obvious insofar as people tend to practice religion in communities and there is a lot of evidence that it strengthens social bonds. 10. But spirituality itself appears to potentially lower loneliness as well. Scholars in 2019 asked 319 people to evaluate statements such as, "I have a personally meaningful relationship with God." They found a strong negative correlation between spiritual affirmations and loneliness, leading to higher levels of mental health. 11. Here's the bottom line: spiritual, religious, and other metaphysical experiences are not an imaginary phenomenon. They affect your brain, and give you access to insights and knowledge you can't get in other ways. But doing so is filled with challenges. The three most common are our difficulty focusing, finding our path, and holding the right motives. These are the challenges we take on in this chapter. Challenge 1. Your monkey mind. One of the biggest problems with a life is that, well, we miss too much of it. Not literally, of course, but think about it. How much of your time are you really present? We are not completely conscious of the present moment. Most of the time in ordinary life, much of our attention is on the past and future at the expense of being mindfully in the here and now. If you don't believe it, just observe your thoughts at any moment, jumping around like a crazy monkey. 1 minute you are ruminating on what somebody told you last week, the next you are thinking about what you plan to do on the weekend. In the meantime, you are missing your life right now. Now, close your eyes in meditation or prayer. You become truly present. In this moment of your life you are mindful. In other words, the transcendent gives you more of your life to experience. Yet we don't do it very much. Humans have a remarkable ability to resist living in the present moment. Indeed, the quintessential humanness of the mind is the ability to rerun past events and pre-run future scenarios. This is a great blessing, of course, as it allows us to learn maximally from our experiences and effectively practice for the future. It is also a curse. The Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh explained this in his book The Miracle of Mindfulness. While washing the dishes, one should only be washing the dishes, which means that while washing the dishes one should be completely aware of the fact that one is washing the dishes. 12. If we are thinking about the past or future, we are not alive during the time we are washing the dishes. You don't have to be a follower of Buddhism to know that mindfulness is all the rage. Across dozens of apps and websites, you can learn the latest techniques. Besides putting you in the here and now, research finds that it may be a remedy for many personal problems. It has been shown to lessen depression, lower anxiety, improve memory, and decrease back pain. 13. It can even raise test scores. 14. If mindfulness is so great, then why aren't all of us practicing it every day? Why are we still spending so much time romanticizing or regretting the past and anticipating the future? The answer is that mindfulness is not natural, and it's actually quite hard. Many psychologists believe that as a species, humans are not evolved to enjoy the here and now. Rather, we are wired to think about the past and especially the future, to consider new scenarios and try out new ideas. The psychologist Martin Seligman goes so far as to call our species Homo prospectus, meaning we naturally reside in the future. 15. Avoiding mindfulness can also be an effective way to distract yourself from pain. Researchers have shown that people's minds are significantly more likely to wander when they're in a negative mood than when they're in a positive mood. 16. Some sources of unhappiness that lead to distraction and mind wandering are fear, anxiety, neuroticism, and, of course, boredom. 17. Having a negative self-perception, feeling ashamed of yourself, for example, is also likely to lead to distraction from the here and now. Scholars have shown that people who suffered from a lot of shame tended to mind wander considerably more than those who did not. 18. If you struggle with mindfulness, two underlying problems might be to blame. You don't know how to be at home in your head, or you do know and have concluded that home is no fun. If the former is what's stopping you, then by all means, dig into the extensive and growing technology and literature on mindfulness. You might try formal meditation or simply paying attention more to your current surroundings. If your problem is the latter, you need to face the source of fear and discomfort head on. Avoiding yourself won't work in the long run. In fact, a lot of research shows that mind wandering to avoid emotions makes things worse, not better. 19. You might choose to take on the source of your unhappiness in the here and now with professional assistance, just as you might seek help from a counselor about a marital problem. But even just acknowledging your uncomfortable emotions, your fear, shame, guilt, sadness, or anger can be the beginning of the solution, insofar as it encourages you to confront your resistance to experiencing these feelings. It might be less unpleasant than you think. Note that mindfulness is not the same thing as navel-gazing. To be here now does not mean obsessing over yourself and your problems and disregarding others. Scholars have shown that excessive self-concern can increase defensiveness and negativity. 20. Mindfulness should work instead toward a sense of yourself as part of the wider world, and an observation of your emotions without judgment. As you work to focus on the present, remind yourself of two things: you are just one of 8 billion human beings, and your emotions will come and go as a normal part of being alive. The tools of metacognition discussed earlier in this book should be a big help to you as you work to become more mindful. There will still be times when you will be distracted. You're only human, after all. And at times, you might even want to do so purposively. For example, you might choose to read a magazine while waiting at the dentist to avoid thinking about your impending root canal. The key here is that you are making an occasional choice, meaning that you are in fact managing your emotions, rather than allowing them to manage you. In this case, distraction is one tool in your emotional arsenal to be used sparingly. But mindfulness should always be your default. Challenge 2. Getting started. The most important part of starting, or supercharging, a transcendental journey is, well, starting. People go their whole lives wishing they had faith, but not doing the work. Enlightenment doesn't just come, like a change in the weather. It requires serious attention. And like anything else, going to college, getting in better physical shape, the hardest part is just starting, which is a choice. Here are a few ideas to help. First, keep it simple. Good professional fitness trainers who specialize in clients who haven't exercised in many years, or perhaps ever, never start with a complicated battery of tests and a step-by-step protocol of exercises. For the first few weeks, the client is encouraged to do something easy and active for 1 hour a day. Usually, that means going for a walk. More on that in a moment. Similarly, when people ask how to get started on a spiritual path, the best answer is not beginning with a 30-day silent retreat in the Himalayas, sitting in the lotus position, the equivalent of trying to deadlift your body weight on your first visit to the gym. Rather, it is something easy and simple, like slipping into a religious service and sitting in the back, observing without judgment or expectation. Second, read more. A transcendental practice requires learning. Start reading widely from the wisdom literatures, including your own tradition, if you have one. In a similar spirit as our last piece of advice, don't start with the densest texts, rather than trying to get through the Buddha's discourses in the original Pali or Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologia. Try a more popular title on Buddhism or Christianity at your library or bookstore. 21. Third, let go. You are committed to managing your own life. You are willing to do the work to get happier, which is great. But this tendency might come at a cost. Specifically, you might tend to want to control things. A need to control everything can be an impediment in your spiritual journey, which often requires an intuitive attitude to allow yourself, in a childlike way, to have experiences you don't understand, as opposed to strangling them with facts and knowledge. There is irony in mentioning this in a book about the science of happiness, of course. But scholars have shown that people who have a more intuitive reasoning style, who answer questions based on feel, reported stronger religious beliefs than those who were more analytical. 22. This finding was independent of differences in education, income, political views, and intelligence. In other words, don't rule something out just because you can't explain it. Maybe you have read this far and are throwing up your hands, saying, I don't get it. I'm just not a spiritual person. Okay, fine. Then just do one thing: go outside and connect with the outdoors. This is one of the most time-tested ways to have a transcendental experience. Unfortunately, it is increasingly rare. After all, the percentage of Americans working outdoors fell from 90% at the beginning of the 19th century to less than 20% at the close of the 20th century. 23. We show the same pattern in our pursuit of leisure. Americans went on 1 billion fewer outings in nature in 2018 compared with 2008. 24. Today, 85% of adults say they spent more time outside when they were kids than children do today. 25. The trend away from nature over the past few centuries, and especially the past few decades, has straightforward explanations. To begin with, the world's population has urbanized, so nature is less at hand. According to U.S. Census data, 6.1% of the American population resided in urban areas in 1800. In 2000, 79% did. 26. Second, no matter where you live, technology is displacing the outdoors in your attention. A 2017 study noted that screen time is rising rapidly for all age groups. Adults averaged 10 hours and 39 minutes a day in 2016, even as hunting, fishing, camping, and children's outdoor play have declined substantially. 27. Perhaps you are an urbanite with an indoor job, tied to your devices all day and night, and besides walking from your house to the car or train, you haven't spent serious time in nature in months or even years. If so, you are probably suffering some noticeable malaise, such as stress, anxiety, or even depression. In one study from 2015, researchers assigned people to walk in either nature or an urban setting for 50 minutes. 28. The nature walkers had lower anxiety, better mood, and better working memory. They were also much less likely to agree with statements such as, I often reflect on episodes of my life that I should no longer concern myself with. A focus on the metaphysical makes you a lot less concerned with the opinions of others. It's no surprise that exposure to nature does the same thing. In 2008, researchers found that people who walked in a city for 15 minutes were 39% more likely to agree with the statement, "Right now, I am concerned about the way I present myself," than people who spent the same amount of time walking in nature. 29. If you still need convincing, maybe a few words from the American writer Henry David Thoreau, who believed in the transcendental power of nature will help. I was walking in a meadow, the source of a small brook, when the sun at last, just before setting, after a cold, gray day, reached a clear stratum in the horizon. He wrote in 1862-30, in this ordinary experience, he found the sublime, as if he were walking to the Holy Land. Till one day the sun shall shine more brightly than ever he has done. Shall perchance shine into our minds and hearts, and light up our whole lives with a great awakening light, as warm and serene and golden as on a bankside in autumn. Thoreau believed that nature has powers beyond our understanding, that contact with the earth transforms us. Modern science says he was probably right. 31 researchers have found that exposure to natural light, but not artificial light, synchronizes your internal circadian clock to the rising and setting of the sun. 32. Ditch your devices and even artificial lights for a few days, and sleeping naturally might be easier than ever. Similarly, some small experiments have found that when people are in physical contact with the earth in ways as simple as walking barefoot outdoors, known as earthing or grounding the human body, their self-reported health and mood can improve. If you want to feel better, take your shoes off and spend the day outside, it might help. 33. Here's the bottom line, there are any number of ways to get started on a transcendental journey. It doesn't have to be complicated or esoteric. In fact, it should start modestly and simply. Pray a little, read a little, let go for a walk outside without devices. The important thing is to start. Challenge 3. The right focus. The biggest mistake people make when seeking a spiritual path is pursuing it for their personal ends. The earlier chapters on family and friendship pointed out a paradox: we tend to get love most when we give it freely. Faith and spirituality feature a similar paradox. Namely, you get the personal benefit primarily when that benefit is not the goal. A Tibetan Buddhist monk once made this point when he gently chided many American practitioners of Buddhism. 34. So many American Buddhists practice in order to relieve their personal problems, he said. They do not understand that the true point is to seek the truth and relieve others of their suffering. To be more specific, in Buddhism, the goal of the practitioner is to be a bodhisattva, to achieve a Buddha nature and thus break out of the endless cycle of suffering in birth and death, yet choose not to do so, so as to remain in this cycle of life to help others achieve greater enlightenment as well. The Japanese Zen Buddhists teach their faith using koans, or riddles, to meditate on. One of the most famous is, what is the sound of one hand clapping? It seems like a nonsensical question until you realize the answer. An illusion. One hand in a clapping movement can make you imagine a clapping sound, but it does not make a real sound until a second hand is added. This illustrates the Buddhist idea of emptiness, that each of us is empty of meaning until we are in communion with others. To enjoy love, you must love others and be loved by them. That is why a bodhisattva meditates not to relieve his own stress and anxiety, but to focus on the stress and anxiety of others. This is the mystical truth behind almost all faiths and traditions. Serve the tenets of the divine, seek the ultimate truth, and thus work to make others happier rather than yourself. Only then will you be more successful in your own quest. This paradox is summed up by C.S. Lewis in his famous book Mere Christianity, in his description of a man named Dick who wants to be happy and good. As long as Dick does not turn to God, he thinks his niceness is his own, and just as long as he thinks that it is not his own. It is only when Dick realizes that his niceness is not his own but a gift from God, and when he offers it back to God, it is just then that it begins to be really his own. For now Dick is beginning to take a share in his own creation. The only things we can keep are the things we freely give to God. What we try to keep for ourselves is just what we are sure to lose. 35. If you walk the transcendental path, you will get happier, but only if getting happier is not your goal. Your goal must be seeking truth and the good of others. The way forward. We can't tell you what your transcendental path should be, but we can tell you that you will build a better life if you pursue one. The science clearly shows that metaphysical experiences are not superstitious nonsense, but Rather provide a benefit to your happiness you cannot get elsewhere. Finding and following your path presents challenges, of course, of which we have laid out 3 of the biggest. Take on the following lessons using your management skills, and you will experience the greatest gain. 1. Spiritual life can be hard because it goes against the stimuli around us that constantly fragment our attention. We must work to be present and mindful, and we can get better at doing so. 2. It is an error to wait around and hope that a spiritual practice finds us. That probably won't occur. We need to do the work to build a spiritual practice, just like anything else of value. The most important step is the first one. 3. The focus of a faith or spiritual practice must not be primarily an inner one. The benefit to ourselves is immense, but the motive must be a search for truth and the love of others. Unlike the lessons in the preceding chapters, these are harder to put into immediate practice, with immediate results. So let's add a 4th lesson, to usher in the first 3 over the coming months and years of your life. Commit a set period of time each day to your spiritual or philosophical life. For example, start your morning with just 15 minutes of reading wisdom literature and sitting in contemplation or prayer. If your house is too crazy for that, find that slot during your lunch break or in the evening. At first, 15 minutes will feel like a lot, but it will get easier over time. And if you keep at it, you will want to extend it. The key to success at the beginning, though, is consistency. Just 15 minutes, every day. This brings us to the end of the second phase in the plan to build the life you want. Pay attention and manage what matters: the 4 fundamental pillars of family, friendship, work, and faith by taking on the greatest challenges to each one. In these 8 chapters, we have covered an enormous amount of knowledge, spanning literally thousands of scientific studies. No doubt, many of the lessons and concepts surprised you. Many others you knew, but you needed to be reminded. But probably all of them made basic sense. In general, happiness lessons should always pass the grandma test. If grandma would say, "That's nonsense," you should be very suspicious. The challenge now is remembering the lessons. For most people, life's complications make it easy to forget new ideas and slip back into old patterns. For this reason, this book finishes with a truly surefire way to cement the principles of building your life and getting happier. Become the teacher. A note from Oprah. I have loved learning ever since I was a little girl. I have also loved sharing what I've learned. In fact, as I write this, it seems to me that knowledge is never really complete until it's shared. For me, the Oprah Winfrey Show was always at heart a classroom. I was curious about so many things, from the intricacies of the digestive system to the meaning of life. There was so much I wanted to know, so many questions to be asked and answered, and I figured other people were likewise curious and questioning, so I invited guests to come and be our teachers. Of course, it turned out that many members of the audience also had wisdom to share. So many people came to the show and shared so much. The joy of shared knowledge also explains why I started a book club. The novels and memoirs that mean the most to me are the ones that open my eyes to deeper truths and new experiences, or bring meaningful ideas into sharper focus, and it's not in my nature to keep these truths and experiences and ideas to myself. Even as I'm reading a book I love, I'm imagining talking about it with other people, and that only enhances my enjoyment. The truth is, I have always felt called to be a teacher, and I say that with no hubris in my heart. In my view, a teacher is not the one who knows everything, it's simply the one who shares what they've learned. I have taught classes and workshops at my girls' school in South Africa, but mostly my role there is mentor. Well, mentor and student. I could write a book about the tough lessons I learned in the process of building a school. Not to mention the lessons the girls themselves continually teach me. The sheer number of them, hundreds by now, reinforces the lesson of detached attachment I mentioned earlier. It's just not possible to be invested in specific outcomes for so many girls, each of whom has her own background, her own abilities, her own dreams and desires. My job is to open the door for them. Only they can decide what they'll do when they walk through. When I'm mentoring my girls, I like to emphasize that success in life isn't as much about having the right answers as it is about asking the good questions. What does living well mean for me? Not according to someone else's model. And how do I do it? What is genuinely worth striving for? What can I offer, and how can I serve? What lessons can I glean from my experiences, especially the toughest ones? How do I make the best use of my limited time on this earth? It's no coincidence that these are the very same questions Arthur Brooks has explored in this book. They get to the heart of what it means to get happier. They acknowledge that it is an active process, a matter not of being but of becoming. And they spotlight the most important part of the process, your agency. They recognize that the person in control of your happiness is and forever will be you. I see myself in so much of this book. And I suspect you have seen yourself, too. Not just the person you've been, but the truly happier person you can become. As I follow the principles that Arthur presents, I am becoming happier. I'm actually having fun, a word that previously didn't exist in my vocabulary because I was so work-focused. Now I'm traveling, adventuring, saying yes to new experiences because I want to and not because I feel obligated. And I've verified many times over that happiness multiplies when we share it. I hope this book lets your sharing begin. When you learn, teach. When you get, give. Maya Angelou. Conclusion. Now, become the teacher. You picked up this book to build a happier life, and you've read a lot of ideas on how to do it. To put the ideas into practice, you have to remember them. Here's how to do that. Teach what you've learned to a plastic platypus. Okay, you probably need some explanation here. There is a technique known as plastic platypus learning, in which people are instructed to explain something they have learned to any inanimate object, such as, well, a plastic platypus. It could also be a rubber ducky or a bowling ball. That isn't the point. What the research on this technique shows is that if you can explain something coherently, you will absorb the information and remember it. The reason is pretty simple, and you already know it. You need to be metacognitive with the information to use your prefrontal cortex so you can understand and use it. And the best way to do that is to explain it clearly. Even better than a plastic platypus, though, is a real person, and there has been a lot of research showing that teaching a subject is the most reliable way to learn it deeply. This was first demonstrated by the famous language teacher Jean-Paul Martin, who successfully taught foreign languages by making his students instruct one another. One later research illustrated this concept in experiments in which one group of students studied materials by themselves while a second group explained them to others too. They both had the same amount of time. The second group, the student teachers, understood and remembered the material better than the first. Teaching others how to get happier is about more than just solidifying the ideas in your own mind. With happiness in decline almost everywhere, and especially in the United States, our world needs advocates and warriors to help the millions suffering without relief. So many still believe that there is not hope as long as there is pain in their lives. Find the people in your life in this situation. Be their hope. Now, you might be saying, how can I help someone else build her life when mine is still a work in progress? That is precisely when and why you are the most effective teacher. The best happiness teachers are the ones who have had to work to gain the knowledge they offer, not the lucky ones who fall out of bed every day in a great mood. Those lucky few are like the fitness influencers on Instagram who have superior genetics, eat whatever they want, and have no idea what the challenges are for the rest of us. Don't hide your own struggles. Use them to help others understand that they are not alone, and getting happier is possible. Your pain gives you credibility, and your progress makes you an inspiration. And sharing with others increases that progress, making it the perfect win-win. Older, wiser, happier. Teaching happiness is also the best strategy for getting happier as time goes on. One of the biggest sources of suffering for many people in middle age is the perception that while they have many years of life ahead, they are somehow declining in their abilities. This is especially true for people who have invested a lot in their skills. If you feel like you have lost your edge or are a little burned out in middle age or beyond, this is normal. Researchers have long noted that many skills analysis and innovation, for example, tend to rise quickly, very early in life and then fall through one's 30s and 40s. This is called fluid intelligence. It's what makes you good at what you do as a young adult, and you really notice it when it declines, which is usually earlier than you expect. 3. There's another kind of intelligence that comes later, called crystallized intelligence, which is an increasing knack for combining complex ideas, understanding what they mean, recognizing patterns, and teaching others. This rises throughout middle age and can stay high well into old age. If you are over 50 and notice that you are better at seeing patterns and explaining ideas to others than you used to be, it's because your crystallized intelligence is higher. The research on fluid and crystallized intelligence suggests that people should hold different roles throughout their lives that complement each type of smarts, but always tending toward teaching and mentoring others as the years pass, because that is your increasing natural strength. Maybe that is a change in job or career, or a different emphasis in what you do in your regular profession. The way we often see this play out for people who take time away from the workforce to raise their kids is that when the nest is empty, they return to work in a different kind of role than the one they left years earlier. This isn't just professional advice, by the way. In life, we do best and are happiest when we rely more on our wisdom as we age. One of the reasons people love being grandparents so much, besides the fact that you can spoil the kids all day and then they go home, is because it relies on crystallized intelligence. Grandparents lean on their experience and wisdom, and tend not to freak out over little things, which makes everything easier and more fun. And this brings us back to teaching the lessons for getting happier. As you age, becoming a happiness teacher will feel more and more natural to you. The older you get, the more this information will become truly yours. Others will seek you out to learn it. The most important building block of all. As you've read this book, you may have noticed a running theme: every practice that helps you build the life you want is based on one thing: love. To embark on a project to get happier, and to do the work to manage your emotions, is to say that you love yourself enough to make this investment. All of the pillars of happiness are about love, too: love for your family, love for your friends, love made visible by bringing your best self to work, and love for the divine through your transcendent journey. And to become the teacher of what you have learned is an act of abundant love toward everyone in your life. Like happiness, love isn't a feeling. As Martin Luther King Jr. put it in 1957, love is not this sentimental something that we talk about. It's not merely an emotional something. Love is creative, understanding goodwill for all. For love is a commitment, an act of will and discipline. Love, like getting happier, is something that you get better at with practice. It becomes more automatic with repetition. It becomes a habit over time. And when it does, everything else falls into place. Start each day saying, "I don't know what this day will bring, but I will love others and allow myself to be loved." Whenever you are wondering what to do in a particular situation, whether it's big, like deciding to take a new job, or little, like letting someone into your lane in traffic, ask, what is the most loving thing to do right now? Armed with the knowledge you have gained in this book, you will never go wrong. Of course, you aren't made of stone, and even if you commit to emotional self-management and to building your family, friendships, work, and faith, you will still have days when love seems out of reach. You will react badly to someone, you will let your feelings get the better of you, you will throw up your hands in frustration. That's only natural. The key to progress isn't perfection, it's to begin again, and again, and again. Every day is a new day, and another opportunity to pick up the hammer and go back to work. Just remind yourself that the life you want is built on love. And start again. The two of us are doing the same with our own lives. We are part of the same project to get happier by building our lives on a foundation of love. This is the principle that brought us together in this partnership, and to write this book. So just remember, We are walking alongside you, wishing you are very best in your journey. And we ask that you do the same for us. Strengthening one another, we can help each other build the